Delete it. Those were the words that changed everything. Not a love confession, not a first kiss, but two simple words spoken by the most powerful woman in the building. Adrienne Cole, CEO of Brightstone Publishing, stared at the dating profile glowing on her laptop screen, then looked directly at Ethan Carter, the quiet editor she'd pulled into her office on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. In that moment, something shifted between them, something neither had planned for, something that would unravel 3 years of carefully maintained distance and force a grieving widower to face the one question he'd been running from. Was he brave enough to love again? If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves you, hit that like button and stay until the very end. Trust me, you won't want to miss where this goes. The morning light filtered through the blinds of Ethan Carter's bedroom at exactly 6:17 a.m., 3 minutes before his alarm was set to go off. He'd been awake for 20 minutes already, staring at the ceiling, running through the day's mental checklist the way he did every single morning. Pack Maya's lunch, check her homework folder, drop her at school by 7:45, get to the office by 8:30, stay invisible, pick her up at 3:15, dinner by 6, homework, bath, bedtime story, sleep, repeat. For 3 years, this routine had been his lifeline, the structure that kept him and his daughter afloat in the aftermath of loss that had nearly drowned them both. Ethan pushed himself out of bed and padded down the hallway of their small 2-bedroom apartment, pausing at Maya's door. It was cracked open just enough for him to see her sprawled across her twin bed, one leg hanging off the side, her dark hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink. She slept exactly like her mother had, wild and uncontained, as if even in dreams she refused to be confined. The thought came before he could stop it, and with it, the familiar ache that lived permanently in his chest. Sarah. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days since the car accident that had rewritten their entire lives in a single, terrible moment. He closed his eyes, steadied his breathing, and pushed the thought away. There was no time for grief in the morning routine. Grief was for the nights after Maya fell asleep, when the apartment grew too quiet and the weight of everything he'd lost pressed down on him until he couldn't breathe. Dad? Ethan's eyes snapped open. Maya was sitting up now, rubbing her eyes with small fists, her favorite purple pajamas twisted around her thin frame. "Morning, sweetheart," he said, forcing brightness into his voice. "Did I wake you?" "No, I was already awake." She yawned, revealing the gap where her 2 front teeth had been. "I was thinking about what to draw today." "Yeah, what's the plan?" "Maybe a dragon, or a castle, or a dragon in a castle." She bounced slightly on her knees, suddenly energized by the idea. "Can I bring my sketchbook to school?" "If you promise to keep it in your backpack until recess." "I promise!" She scrambled out of bed and rushed past him toward the bathroom, her footsteps thundering despite her small size. Ethan smiled despite himself. Maya was the one bright spot in his carefully controlled world, the one thing that made the endless, monotonous routine worthwhile. She had Sarah's spirit, her creativity, her ability to find joy in small things. Sometimes that made the loss harder. Sometimes it made it bearable. He moved to the kitchen and started the coffee maker, then began assembling Maya's lunch with mechanical precision. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, carrots, granola bar, juice box. The same lunch he'd made every day for the past 3 years, with minor variations based on what was on sale at the grocery store. "Dad, can I have pancakes?" Maya appeared in the doorway, already dressed in mismatched clothes she'd clearly chosen herself, striped leggings, a polka dot shirt, and the light-up sneakers she refused to stop wearing, even though they were half a size too small. Ethan glanced at the clock. 6:47 a.m. Pancakes would throw off the entire schedule. "How about tomorrow?" he offered. "Saturday morning. We'll make a whole stack." Maya's face fell slightly, but she nodded, already used to compromises and delayed gratification. "Okay, can I have cereal with the marshmallows?" "Deal." They moved through the rest of the morning routine with practiced efficiency. Breakfast, teeth brushing, backpack check, shoe tying. By 7:42, they were in Ethan's aging Honda Civic, heading toward Riverside Elementary with 3 minutes to spare before the final bell. "Remember, I'm picking you up today." Ethan said as they pulled into the drop-off lane. Not Mrs. Henderson. I know, Dad. You tell me every time. Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and grabbed her backpack, but before she opened the door, she turned back to him. Are you okay? The question caught him off guard. What? Yeah, honey, I'm fine. Why? She shrugged, her expression too serious for an 8-year-old. You just seem sad sometimes, in the mornings. Ethan's throat tightened. He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm okay, sweetheart, I promise. Now go before you're late. She kissed his cheek and scrambled out of the car, her backpack bouncing against her small shoulders as she ran toward the school entrance. Ethan watched until she disappeared inside, then sat for a moment in the idling car, gripping the steering wheel. You just seem sad sometimes. Out of the mouths of babes. He took a deep breath, shifted into drive, and headed toward Brightstone Publishing. Brightstone Publishing occupied the 7th through 10th floors of a glass and steel building in downtown Portland, overlooking the Willamette River. It was the kind of place that looked impressive from the outside, sleek, modern, successful. But inside it was just like any other office. Cubicles, fluorescent lighting, the constant hum of printers and hushed phone conversations. Ethan had worked there for 6 years, the last 3 as a senior copy editor in the fiction department. It was steady work, predictable work, the kind of job that paid the bills and required minimal emotional investment. He edited manuscripts, corrected grammar, suggested revisions, and sent them back up the chain. He rarely spoke to anyone beyond his immediate team, attended only mandatory meetings, and left every day at exactly 5 p.m. to pick up Maya. His coworkers knew almost nothing about him. They didn't know he was a widower. They didn't know he had a daughter. They didn't know that before Sarah died, he'd been working on a novel of his own, a sprawling literary thriller he'd abandoned the day of her funeral and never touched again. They knew him as Ethan Carter, the quiet editor in Cubicle 7B who never caused problems and never made waves. And that was exactly how he wanted it. Morning, Ethan. He looked up from his desk to see Rachel Kim, one of the junior editors, standing beside his cubicle with a stack of manuscripts. Morning, he replied, accepting the stack without making eye contact. These need to be turned around by Friday, Rachel said. Priority rush for marketing. Some new thriller series they're pushing for fall release. Got it. Rachel lingered for a moment as if she wanted to say something else, but Ethan had already turned his attention to his computer screen, and she eventually walked away. He spent the morning in his usual rhythm, red pen in hand, headphones on, the world narrowed to paragraphs and punctuation. Around 11:30, his desk phone rang, startling him out of his focused state. He picked up without looking at the caller ID. Ethan Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Layla from Miss Cole's office. Miss Cole would like to see you in her office at noon. Ethan's stomach dropped. I'm sorry, who? Adrienne Cole, the CEO. She'd like to meet with you at noon today. His mind raced. In 6 years at Brightstone, he'd never once been summoned to the executive floor. He'd seen Adrienne Cole exactly 3 times, twice at company-wide meetings, and once in the elevator where she'd stood in perfect silence for 8 floors while he'd tried not to exist. Is everything okay? He managed. She didn't say, just asked me to schedule the meeting, 10th floor, corner office. Don't be late. The line went dead. Ethan sat frozen, staring at the phone. His first thought was that he was being fired, but why would the CEO personally fire a mid-level editor? His second thought was that he'd made some catastrophic error on a manuscript, something that had cost the company money, but he triple-checked everything. His third thought was that maybe something had happened to Maya, and somehow the school had contacted his work instead of his cell phone. He grabbed his phone. No missed calls, no messages. Whatever this was, he had 28 minutes to mentally prepare for it. He couldn't. The 10th floor was a different world. Where the editorial floors were cramped and cluttered, the executive level was all clean lines and expensive furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city. The air even smelled different, less like old coffee and printer ink, more like leather and something vaguely floral. Ethan gave his name to the receptionist, a polished woman in her 30s who smiled at him with practiced professionalism. Ms. Cole is expecting you. Go right in. He walked toward the corner office, his heart hammering. The door was already open. Adrienne Cole sat behind a massive glass desk, her attention fixed on a laptop screen. She was exactly as he remembered from the company meetings. Late 30s, sharp features, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a charcoal blazer that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent, and her expression was the kind of focused intensity that made grown men stammer. She didn't look up when he entered. "Mr. Carter, close the door and sit down." Her voice was clipped, efficient, the kind of tone that didn't waste time on pleasantries. Ethan did as instructed, settling into one of the leather chairs across from her desk. He folded his hands in his lap, trying to appear calm, while his mind screamed through worst-case scenarios. Adrienne continued typing for another 30 seconds, an eternity, before finally looking up at him. Her eyes were dark gray, almost slate, and unnervingly direct. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked. "No, ma'am." "Good. Because if you did, it would mean you'd been gossiping, and I have no tolerance for that." She closed her laptop with a decisive click. "I need your help with something unconventional." Ethan blinked. "Okay." "It's personal, not work-related. If you're uncomfortable with that, you can leave now, and we'll never speak of this conversation again." His curiosity overrode his anxiety. "I'm listening." Adrienne studied him for a long moment, as if weighing whether he was trustworthy. Finally, she turned her laptop around so he could see the screen. It was a dating profile. "My sister created this for me," Adrienne said, her tone flat, almost clinical, "without my permission. She thinks I work too much and need to put myself out there." She said the phrase like it physically pained her. "I told her I'd review it before she posted it, but honestly, I can't bring myself to read past the first sentence. It's horrifying." Ethan leaned forward, reading the opening line. "Successful CEO, seeking someone who can keep up with my fast-paced lifestyle. I love long walks on the beach, trying new restaurants, and spontaneous adventures." He couldn't suppress a small smile. "You think it's funny?" Adrienne's voice was ice. "No, He caught himself. "It's just, this doesn't sound like you at all. You've spoken to me for approximately 90 seconds in your entire life. How would you know what sounds like me?" She had a point. "You're right," Ethan admitted. "I don't know you, but I do know that someone who schedules meetings in 30-minute blocks and answers emails at midnight probably doesn't take spontaneous beach walks." For the first time, something shifted in Adrienne's expression, not quite a smile, but a softening around the eyes. "Exactly. My sister wrote this based on what she thinks men want to hear, not who I actually am. And I refuse to lie about myself just to attract someone." "Then why not just delete it?" "Because she's relentless. If I don't at least try to engage with this ridiculous exercise, she'll never let it go. So I'm going to rewrite it, honestly, and I need someone with actual writing skills to help me do it. And you chose me because you're good at your job. Your editorial notes are consistently sharp and insightful. And because you're quiet. I don't need this becoming office gossip." She paused. "Will you help me?" Ethan should have said no. Should have politely declined and returned to his cubicle and his safe, invisible existence. But there was something in the way she'd asked. Not commanding, not demanding, but genuinely asking. That made him hesitate. "Okay," he heard himself say. "I'll help." Adrienne's shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. "Good. Let's start with the basics. What does this profile get wrong about dating profiles in general?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, considering. "It's generic. It could describe anyone. Successful CEO, seeking someone who can keep up. What does that even mean? And the interests are cliches. Everyone says they love trying new restaurants. It tells potential matches nothing real about who you are. So what should it say? It should be specific, honest. Even if that honesty makes you less universally appealing, the right person will respond to the truth. The wrong people will filter themselves out." Adrienne pulled her laptop back and opened a blank document. "All right, let's rebuild this from scratch. Ask me questions." "Okay, what do you actually do for fun when you're not working?" She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "I work most of the time." "Most of the time, not all the time. What do you do with the rest?" Another pause. I read. Biographies mostly. History. I like understanding how people think. Good. What else? I visit the art museum. Alone. I prefer going on weekday afternoons when it's quiet. Why alone? Because I don't want to make small talk about the paintings. I just want to look at them. Ethan typed a note on his phone. That's good. Real. What about relationships? What are you actually looking for? Adrian's expression hardened slightly. I'm not looking for anything. My sister is the one who thinks I need someone. But if you were looking, if you wanted someone in your life, what would that look like? She stood abruptly and walked to the window, her back to him. For a long moment, she just stared out at the city. I don't know if I'm built for relationships, she said quietly. I'm too direct, too demanding. I don't soften my edges for people. My last relationship ended because he said I was emotionally unavailable, which is a polite way of saying I didn't perform enough vulnerability to make him feel needed. She turned back to face him. So, what should I put in my profile? Warning, I'm difficult to love. The rawness in her voice caught Ethan off guard. This wasn't the intimidating CEO anymore. This was just a person. Someone tired of pretending. No, he said carefully. You put that you're looking for someone who doesn't need you to be anything other than what you are. Someone who respects your space and your work and doesn't mistake independence for coldness. Adrienne tilted her head slightly, studying him. You're good at this. I used to write, he said before he could stop himself. Used to? He looked away. It's been a while. She didn't push, which he appreciated. Instead, she returned to her desk and opened the document again. They spent the next hour rewriting the profile together. Ethan asked questions. Adrienne answered with increasing honesty. She talked about her love of structure and efficiency, her frustration with people who wasted her time, her guilty pleasure of watching true crime documentaries at 2 a.m. She admitted she'd never been good at small talk, that she'd rather discuss ideas than feelings, that she found most social gatherings exhausting. With each revelation, the profile transformed. The cliches disappeared. What remained was sharp, specific, and undeniably Adrian. I run a publishing company, visit art museums alone on weekday afternoons, and have strong opinions about semicolons. I don't do small talk, spontaneous beach walks, or pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm looking for someone who values honesty over performance, someone who understands that independence isn't the same as isolation. If you need constant validation or someone to complete you, we're not a match. But if you're looking for someone direct, intellectually curious, and capable of respecting boundaries, let's talk. When they finished, Adrienne read through it 3 times in silence. This is accurate, she finally said. Uncomfortably accurate. That's the point. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw something other than professional distance in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition. Can I ask you something? She said. Ethan tensed. Sure. Why are you so quiet? I've seen your work. You're talented, but you make yourself invisible here. Why? The question hit harder than it should have. He could have deflected, could have given some bland answer about preferring to keep to himself. But she'd been honest with him. Brutally honest. He felt like he owed her the same. Because 3 years ago, my wife died in a car accident, he said, the words coming out flat and rehearsed, the way they always did when he had to explain. And I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I realized that if I wanted to keep showing up for her, I needed to stop showing up for everything else. So I made myself small, manageable. I do my job, I take care of Maya, and I don't let anything else in. The silence that followed was profound. Adrienne didn't offer condolences, didn't say she was sorry for his loss, didn't give him any of the practiced responses he'd heard 1,000 times. Instead, she said, "That sounds incredibly lonely." It was such a simple observation, but it cut through every defense he'd built. It is, he admitted, but lonely is safe. Lonely doesn't hurt people. Doesn't it? Before he could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and stood. I have another meeting. Thank you for your help, Mr. Carter. This was unexpectedly helpful. Ethan stood as well, recognizing the dismissal. But as he reached the door, Adrienne spoke again. One more question. He turned back. This profile we just wrote. It's honest. It's real. But you never answered the most important question. Which is, do I actually want to use it, or am I just going through the motions to appease my sister? Ethan considered this. I think that's something only you can answer. Adrian nodded slowly. Fair enough. He left the office and took the elevator back down to the 7th floor, his mind spinning. The whole interaction had been surreal. An hour of unexpected honesty with a woman he'd barely known existed until 90 minutes ago. When he returned to his cubicle, Rachel looked up from her desk. Everything okay? You were gone a while. Yeah, just a project thing. He tried to focus on work for the rest of the afternoon, but his concentration was shot. He kept replaying the conversation in his mind. Adrienne's voice when she'd admitted she didn't know if she was built for relationships. The way she'd looked at him when he'd explained why he made himself invisible. That sounds incredibly lonely. At 5 p.m. exactly, Ethan packed his bag and headed out to pick up Maya. The routine reasserted itself. School pickup, drive home, dinner prep. Maya chattered about her day, about the dragon drawing she'd started, about the boy in her class who'd eaten paste, about the chapter book her teacher was reading aloud. Ethan listened and responded and moved through the familiar rhythms, but part of his mind remained in that 10th floor office, caught in a conversation he hadn't expected to have. That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He hadn't intended to, but he found himself opening the file that held his abandoned novel, 243 pages. 3 years untouched. He read the first chapter, then the second. The writing was raw, unpolished, but there was something alive in it. A voice he'd forgotten he had. He closed the laptop without adding anything new, but for the first time in 3 years, he didn't delete it either. The next morning, Ethan found an email waiting in his inbox. Sender, Adrienne Cole. Subject line, follow-up. Mr. Carter. Thank you again for your assistance yesterday. I've decided not to post the profile. My sister will be disappointed, but I suspect she'll survive. That said, I've been thinking about our conversation. You mentioned that you used to write. I'm curious what stopped you, beyond the obvious tragedy. If you're willing to discuss it, I'd value your perspective. Also, I realize I never asked, are you dating anyone? AC Ethan stared at the screen for a full minute, his heart rate increasing incrementally with each passing second. The question was direct, almost shockingly so. Classic Adrian, based on their brief interaction. No games, no subtle hints, just a straightforward question. He typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, Ms. Cole, no, I'm not dating anyone, haven't since my wife passed. It's not something I've allowed myself to consider. As for the writing, I stopped because I couldn't reconcile the person I was before with the person I became after. The novel I was working on feels like it belongs to someone else now. Why do you ask? Ethan. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Her response came 6 minutes later. Because I'm trying to determine whether I'm reading this situation correctly. Would you like to have dinner with me on Friday? Not as CEO and employee, as 2 people who had an honest conversation and might benefit from having another one. AC Ethan's hands hovered over the keyboard. This was insane. This violated every rule he'd built for himself. No complications, no risk, no opening himself up to loss again. But there was something about Adrienne Cole's directness that cut through all his careful defenses. She wasn't offering romance or promises or expectations. She was offering dinner, conversation, honesty. He thought about what she'd said in her office. That sounds incredibly lonely. He thought about Maya asking him if he was okay, seeing right through him the way kids always did. He thought about the fact that he was 34 years old and had spent the last 3 years existing rather than living. Friday works. Where and when? Ethan. The response was almost immediate. 7 p.m., Osteria Marzano on Burnside. Come alone. AC. Ethan sat back in his chair, staring at the screen, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. Across the office, on the 10th floor, Adrienne Cole closed her laptop and allowed herself the smallest smile. She'd taken a risk, extended an invitation she hadn't planned on extending, and against all odds, he'd said yes. For someone who built her entire life on calculated decisions and measured outcomes, This felt dangerously unpredictable. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, unpredictable didn't feel like a threat. It felt like possibility. The days between Tuesday and Friday moved with excruciating slowness. Ethan found himself checking his email compulsively, though Adrienne sent nothing further. No follow-up messages, no casual workplace exchanges, nothing to indicate that their dinner plans were anything more than a fleeting impulse she might have already reconsidered. At his desk on Wednesday afternoon, he caught himself staring at the same paragraph for 20 minutes, unable to focus on the manuscript in front of him. The protagonist was making a choice that would alter the entire trajectory of the story, and Ethan kept rereading the passage, wondering if the character was being brave or simply reckless. "You all right?" Rachel appeared at his cubicle wall, holding a coffee mug that said, "Powered by caffeine and chaos." Ethan minimized his screen reflexively. "Yeah, fine. Why?" "Because you've been acting weird since Tuesday. Did something happen in that meeting with Cole?" "No, just a project consultation." The lie came easily, practiced. "Nothing major." Rachel studied him with unconcealed skepticism. "Right. Because the CEO regularly pulls mid-level editors into her office for casual chats. I helped her with something, that's all." "Uh-huh." Rachel took a sip of her coffee, clearly not buying it, but willing to let it drop. "Well, whatever it was, try not to look so tense about it. You're making me nervous." After she left, Ethan forced himself back to the manuscript, but his mind kept drifting. He'd agreed to dinner with his boss. His terrifyingly competent, brutally honest, completely intimidating boss. What the hell was he thinking? More pressingly, what was he going to tell Mrs. Henderson? Margaret Henderson was the 72-year-old neighbor who'd been watching Maya after school whenever Ethan's schedule demanded it. She was kind, reliable, and completely invested in Ethan's personal life in the way only elderly neighbors could be. If he told her he had a dinner date, she'd want every detail. She'd ask questions. She'd make assumptions. But he couldn't lie to her. Mrs. Henderson had a sixth sense for deception. Thursday evening, he knocked on her apartment door with Maya in tow. Mrs. Henderson answered in her usual cardigan and reading glasses, her white hair pulled into a neat bun. "Well, hello there, sweetheart," she beamed at Maya before turning to Ethan. "And what brings you two by?" "I need a favor," Ethan said. "Would you be able to watch Maya tomorrow night? Just for a few hours." Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose with interest. "Oh? And what's the occasion?" "I have plans." "Plans." She repeated the word like it was in a foreign language. "Ethan Carter has evening plans that don't involve his daughter or his editing work. This is unprecedented." Maya tugged on his sleeve. "Where are you going, Dad?" "Just dinner with someone from work." Mrs. Henderson's expression shifted from curious to delighted in an instant. "Someone from work. I see. And is this someone a particular gender?" "Mrs. Henderson, it's a reasonable question. You've been a hermit for 3 years. If you're actually going out to dinner with another adult, I think I'm entitled to basic information." Ethan sighed, knowing resistance was futile. "Yes, she's a woman. It's just dinner. Nothing major." "Nothing major," he says. Mrs. Henderson looked down at Maya with conspiratorial glee. "Your father has a date." "What's a date?" Maya asked. "It's when two grown-ups go to dinner together and talk," Ethan explained quickly. "That's all." "Can I come?" "Not this time, kiddo." Maya's face scrunched in thought. "Is she nice?" Ethan paused. Nice wasn't the word anyone would use to describe Adrienne Cole. Intimidating, brilliant, efficient, those were accurate. But nice? "She's interesting," he settled on. "She's very smart." "Does she like drawing?" "I don't know." "You should ask her. That's important." Mrs. Henderson laughed, a warm sound that filled her small apartment. "The girl makes an excellent point. Artists need to stick together." She patted Maya's shoulder before turning back to Ethan. "Of course I'll watch her. What time?" 6:30. I'll have her fed and ready for bed." "Nonsense. We'll have our own dinner party, won't we, Maya? I'll make spaghetti." Maya's eyes lit up. "Can we have meatballs?" "As many as you want." With that settled, Ethan should have felt relieved. Instead, the reality of Friday night became more concrete, more real. and with it came a fresh wave of anxiety that followed him home and kept him awake long after Maya fell asleep. He stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the Portland skyline, and thought about Sarah. 3 years, 2 months, and 23 days. The grief had dulled to a constant ache rather than the sharp, debilitating pain of the early days, but it never fully disappeared. Some mornings he woke up and forgot she was gone. Some nights he still reached for her side of the bed. Was he betraying her by going to dinner with someone else? The thought made him feel ridiculous and adolescent, but he couldn't shake it. Sarah had been his entire world. They'd met in college, married young, built a life together. She'd been the extroverted one, the dreamer, the person who pushed him to take risks and believe in his writing. Without her, he'd become a shadow of who he'd been. He pulled out his phone and opened his photos, scrolling back through years of images until he found one of Sarah, taken a month before she died. She was laughing at something off camera, her blonde hair catching the sunlight, her entire face radiating joy. Maya looked just like her. "I don't know what I'm doing," he whispered to the photograph. "I don't know if I'm ready for this." The photo, predictably, offered no answers. He put the phone away and tried to sleep, but his mind refused to quiet. Tomorrow night, he'd sit across from Adrienne Cole and have a conversation. Just a conversation. He could handle that. He repeated this to himself until exhaustion finally pulled him under. Friday arrived with agonizing inevitability. Ethan went through his morning routine on autopilot, waking Maya, making breakfast, packing her lunch, driving to school. At drop-off, Maya turned to him before getting out of the car. "Good luck on your date, Dad." "It's not a—" He stopped himself. "Thanks, sweetheart." She grinned and ran toward the school building, her backpack bouncing. Work was torture. Every hour dragged. Ethan edited mechanically, making notes he'd probably have to redo later because his concentration was shot. At lunch, he considered canceling. He could send Adrienne a polite email explaining that he'd reconsidered, that this was a bad idea, that he wasn't ready. But every time he opened his email to draft the message, he thought about their conversation in her office. The way she'd looked at him when she'd said, "That sounds incredibly lonely." The way she'd asked her questions, direct, unflinching, refusing to accept surface answers. He wanted more of that, more honesty, more conversation that felt real. So he didn't cancel. At 5 o'clock, he left work and went home to change. His closet offered depressing options: work clothes, casual weekend wear, and nothing that seemed appropriate for dinner with someone like Adrienne Cole. He finally settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt, then second-guessed the choice 3 times before forcing himself to stop. Maya was waiting in the living room, watching him with open fascination. "You look different," she observed. "Different good or different bad?" "Just different. You smell nice." He'd put on cologne for the first time in 3 years, a bottle Sarah had bought him that he'd never had the heart to throw away. "Thanks." At 6:30, he walked Maya over to Mrs. Henderson's apartment. The elderly woman answered the door with barely contained excitement. "Don't you clean up nicely?" she said approvingly. "Now you go have a wonderful time. Maya and I will be just fine." "Bedtime is 8:30, Ethan reminded her. "I know her bedtime, dear. I've been watching this child since she was 5. Now go before you're late." He kissed Maya's forehead. "Be good for Mrs. Henderson." "I'm always good." "That's debatable," Mrs. Henderson said with a wink. Ethan drove toward Burnside Street with his hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Osteria Marzano was a small Italian restaurant known for its authentic cuisine and intimate atmosphere, the kind of place people went for anniversary dinners and marriage proposals. The choice felt significant, though he wasn't sure if Adrienne had meant it that way or simply picked the first decent restaurant she'd thought of. He arrived at 7 o'clock exactly and found parking half a block away. The restaurant's exterior was understated. Brick facade, small windows with warm light spilling out, a hand-painted sign. He stood outside for a full minute, gathering courage before finally walking in. The interior was exactly as intimate as he'd feared. Small tables, dim lighting, the murmur of quiet conversation. A hostess approached with a professional smile. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting someone." "Adrienne Cole?" The hostess's smile shifted, becoming more genuine. "Of course. Ms. Cole arrived a few minutes ago. Right this way." She led him through the restaurant to a corner table near a window overlooking the street. Adrienne sat with perfect posture, a glass of red wine already in front of her. She'd traded her usual severe business attire for something softer, a dark green blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back. The effect was startling. She looked younger, more approachable, though her expression remained characteristically reserved. She stood when she saw him, a gesture that felt oddly formal. "Mr. Carter, you're punctual." "So are you." "I'm always punctual." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Please, sit." Ethan sat, accepting a menu from the hostess before she disappeared. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, growing more awkward by the second. "I should clarify something," Adrienne said finally. "I've never done this before." "Gone to dinner?" "Asked someone to dinner. I've been asked plenty of times. I usually decline. But I've never been the one to initiate." She took a sip of her wine. "So if I seem uncomfortable, that's why." Her honesty disarmed him, as it had in her office. "I haven't been to dinner with anyone in 3 years," Ethan admitted. "So we're both out of practice." "Then we'll muddle through together." A waiter appeared, introducing himself as Marco and reciting the evening specials with practiced enthusiasm. Ethan ordered the first thing that sounded appealing, pasta with wild mushrooms, while Adrienne requested the osso buco. Marco promised to return with wine recommendations and left them alone again. "How's your daughter?" Adrienne asked, and Ethan was surprised she remembered. "She's good. She's staying with my neighbor tonight. They're having a spaghetti dinner." "How old is she again?" 8, almost 9. "That's a difficult age. Old enough to understand loss, young enough to struggle with processing it." The observation was clinical but not unkind. "Yeah, the first year was hard. She had nightmares, refused to sleep in her own room. I ended up putting a sleeping bag on my floor so she could feel safe." "Does she still struggle?" "Sometimes. She's resilient, though. Kids are more adaptable than we give them credit for." He paused. "She asked me if I was okay the other day, said I seemed sad in the mornings." "Are you sad in the mornings?" "I'm sad most of the time," Ethan said, surprising himself with the admission. "I just hide it better during the day." Adrienne nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. "That's exhausting." "It is." Marco returned with wine, presenting the bottle to Adrienne for approval before pouring generous glasses for both of them. After he left, Adrienne leaned forward slightly, her gray eyes fixed on Ethan with unsettling intensity. "Can I ask you something direct?" "You're always direct." "Fair point, but this is more personal than our previous conversation." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Why did you agree to come tonight?" Ethan considered the question. He could offer a safe answer, something polite and deflecting. But Adrienne had extended him honesty. He owed her the same. "Because when we talked in your office, I felt like a person again. Not just Maya's dad or the quiet editor in 7B. Just myself. I haven't felt that way in a long time." Something shifted in Adrienne's expression. Not quite vulnerability, but an opening. "I know what you mean. Most people see the CEO, the demanding boss, the ice queen, as I've been called more than once. They don't see me. What do you want them to see?" She was quiet for a long moment, turning her wine glass slowly between her fingers. "I don't know anymore. I've spent so long building walls that I'm not sure what's behind them. My sister thinks I'm lonely. My ex-boyfriend thought I was incapable of real connection. Maybe they're both right. Or maybe you just haven't found someone who speaks your language." Adrienne looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" "You value directness, efficiency, honesty. Most people are uncomfortable with that. They want softness, emotional performance, the illusion of effortless connection. But that's not how you operate. It doesn't make you incapable of connection. It just means you need someone who doesn't mistake clarity for coldness." The intensity in Adrienne's gaze increased, and Ethan felt suddenly exposed, as if he'd revealed more than he'd intended. "You're very perceptive," she said quietly. "I'm an editor. I read between lines for a living." "This is different. You're reading me. Is that okay?" She took a sip of wine, considering. "Yes. Surprisingly, yes." Their food arrived, interrupting the moment. Marco presented each dish with elaborate descriptions neither of them really listened to. Once he left, they ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the pressure of constant conversation lifting. "This is good," Ethan said, gesturing to his pasta. The ossobuco is excellent. Would you like to try it? Sure. Adrienne lifted a portion onto her fork and extended it across the table. The gesture felt unexpectedly intimate, sharing food, crossing the invisible boundary of personal space. Ethan leaned forward and accepted the bite, the rich flavors of braised veal and wine sauce filling his mouth. Wow, that's incredible. Told you. She smiled, a real smile, not the professional expression she wore at work, and for a moment, Ethan forgot to breathe. They continued eating, trading small observations about the food in the restaurant. The conversation flowed more easily now, the initial awkwardness dissolving into something comfortable. Adrienne asked about his editing work, and he found himself talking about manuscripts he'd worked on, the satisfaction of helping shape a story into its best version. You love it, Adrienne observed. I can hear it in your voice. I do. It's the closest I get to writing without actually writing. Why don't you write anymore? You mentioned you stopped after your wife died, but it's been 3 years. Have you considered starting again? Ethan set down his fork. I've thought about it, but every time I try, I feel like I'm betraying the person I was before. The writer who existed when Sarah was alive. That person had hope, ambition, belief that his stories mattered. I don't have those things anymore. You don't think your stories matter now? I don't know what I have to say that's worth saying. Adrienne leaned back in her chair, studying him. Can I offer an observation? Go ahead. You're punishing yourself. Not consciously, maybe, but you've decided that because Sarah died, you don't deserve to pursue the things that made you happy. Writing, connection, joy. You've built this small, controlled life where nothing can hurt you, but nothing can fulfill you either. And you're calling that responsibility. The words hit like a physical blow. Ethan felt his defenses rise instinctively. That's not fair, isn't it? I'm protecting my daughter. I'm making sure she has stability, consistency, by teaching her that love is dangerous and happiness is temporary. Adrienne's tone wasn't cruel, but it was unflinching. She asked if you were okay. An 8-year-old shouldn't have to worry about her father's emotional well-being. She should see you living, not just surviving. Ethan's hands clenched around his napkin. You don't know anything about being a parent. You're right, I don't. But I know what it's like to build walls so high you forget there's a world outside them. And I know that those walls don't protect you. They just make you lonely. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with tension. Ethan wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the truth of Adrienne's words cut too deep. She was right. He'd been telling himself for 3 years that his controlled, minimal existence was about protecting Maya, but it was really about protecting himself. From pain, from loss, from the terrifying possibility of caring about someone again. I'm sorry, Adrienne said, her voice softer now. That was harsh. No, it was honest. Ethan met her eyes. You asked why I agreed to come tonight. I think part of me knew I needed someone to tell me the truth, even if it hurt. And does it hurt? Yes, but in a way that feels necessary. Marco appeared to clear their plates, asking about dessert. They both declined, opting for coffee instead. When he left, Adrienne reached across the table and did something completely unexpected. She placed her hand over Ethan's. The touch was brief, professional almost, but it sent electricity through him. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think before you answer, she said. Not what you think you should say, what you actually feel. Okay. Have you dated at all since your wife died? No. Have you wanted to? Ethan exhaled slowly. Sometimes, but every time I consider it, I feel guilty. Like I'm replacing Sarah. Like moving forward means forgetting her. And do you believe that's true? That loving someone new means you've forgotten the person you lost? Logically, no. Emotionally, yes. Adrienne withdrew her hand, her expression thoughtful. My father died when I was 15, heart attack. No warning. One day he was there. The next he wasn't. My mother didn't date for 5 years. She said it felt like a betrayal. But when she finally did meet someone, I watched her come back to life. She still loved my father, still kept his photo on her nightstand, but she also allowed herself to be happy again. And seeing that taught me something important. What? That the heart doesn't have a capacity limit. It doesn't work like a glass that can only hold so much water. It expands. You don't love someone new by subtracting love from someone you've lost. You just make more room. Ethan felt something crack open inside him, a pressure releasing that he hadn't fully acknowledged carrying. I don't know if I can do that. Can't or won't. I don't know the difference anymore. Their coffee arrived. They drank in silence, both lost in thought. Outside the window, Portland's evening traffic moved in steady streams, people going about their lives, completely unaware of the conversation happening in this small corner restaurant. I have a confession, Adrian said finally. What? When I asked you to help with that dating profile, I already knew I wasn't going to use it. Ethan looked up, surprised. Then why did you ask me? Because I wanted an excuse to talk to you. I'd noticed you before, the quiet editor who kept to himself, who turned in impeccable work but never attended office events. I was curious. And when I read your editorial notes on that thriller manuscript last month, I saw something in your commentary. Depth, understanding of human emotion and motivation. I wanted to know who wrote those notes. So the profile was a pretext. Yes. I'm sorry if that feels manipulative. It doesn't. It feels honest. He paused. Why me, though? You could have conversations with anyone. No, I couldn't. Most people don't actually listen. They wait for their turn to talk. They perform rather than engage. But when we spoke in my office, you listened. You asked real questions. You saw past the CEO to the person underneath. She met his eyes across the table. That's rare. You did the same for me. I know, that's why I'm sitting here. She took a breath, and for the first time Ethan saw uncertainty in her expression. Can I ask you one more question? Of course. The dating profile we wrote together, it asked what I'm looking for. I told you I wanted someone who values honesty over performance, someone who respects boundaries and independence. But I didn't tell you the whole truth. What's the whole truth? I'm looking for someone who isn't afraid of me. Most men are intimidated by successful women, especially women who don't perform femininity the way society expects. They want me to be softer, more accommodating, more emotionally available. But you don't seem afraid. I'm terrified, Ethan admitted, but not of you. Of this. Of letting someone in. Of caring about someone again and potentially losing them. That's different. That's honest fear, not ego-driven intimidation. She paused. So I need to know, are you willing to try? Not a relationship, not yet. Just more conversations, more honesty, more of whatever this is. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. This was the moment, the choice point. He could retreat back into his carefully controlled life, his protective walls, his safe routine, or he could step forward into uncertainty. He thought about Maya's drawing of dragons and castles. He thought about his abandoned novel gathering digital dust. He thought about Sarah's laugh in that photograph, full of joy and life. I have one condition, he said. Adrienne straightened slightly. What? You have to meet Maya. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, she's part of my life, a huge part, and I won't keep secrets from her. I wouldn't ask you to. She's not easy. She asks a lot of questions. She'll want to show you her drawings. She'll probably interrogate you about your opinions on dragons versus unicorns. I can handle 8-year-olds. You say that now. Adrian smiled. Ethan, I run a company with 200 employees. I think I can manage one precocious child. Besides, she sounds wonderful. She is. Then, yes, I'd like to meet her when you're ready. Marco returned with the check, which Adrian intercepted before Ethan could reach for it. I invited you. I'm paying. That doesn't seem fair. Life isn't fair, but dinner is my treat. She placed her card on the small tray without looking at the total. Besides, I'm the CEO. I can afford it. They walked out of the restaurant into the cool Portland evening. The street was quieter now, foot traffic thinning as the night deepened. They stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Thank you, Ethan said, for tonight, for the honesty. Thank you for saying yes, for being brave enough to show up. I almost didn't. But you did. That counts. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing not the intimidating CEO, But the woman who'd admitted she didn't know what was behind her own walls, who'd shared her fear of being too difficult to love, who'd asked him direct questions because she valued truth over comfort. Adrienne? Yes? I'm glad you deleted that profile. Her smile was genuine, reaching her eyes. So am I. They said goodnight and walked to their respective cars. Ethan drove home with his mind racing, replaying every moment of the evening. When he arrived at Mrs. Henderson's apartment to pick up Maya, the elderly woman took one look at his face and grinned. Good date? Yeah, he said, unable to suppress his own smile. Really good. Maya was half asleep on Mrs. Henderson's couch, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Ethan scooped her up, thanking his neighbor, and carried his daughter back to their apartment. As he tucked her into bed, Maya's eyes fluttered open. Did you have fun, Dad? Sweetheart. She nice? He thought about Adrienne's directness, her refusal to soften her edges, her unflinching honesty. She's not nice in the traditional sense, but she's real, and I like her. Good. Maya yawned and snuggled into her pillow. I want to meet her. You will. Soon. Promise? Promise. Maya fell back asleep almost immediately. Ethan stood in her doorway, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of responsibility and love that defined his entire existence. But for the first time in 3 years, that weight felt different. Not lighter, exactly, but more balanced. As if he'd been carrying it all on one shoulder and had finally shifted some of it to the other. He walked to his own room, pulled out his laptop, and opened the file containing his abandoned novel. 243 pages stared back at him. He read the last paragraph he'd written, 3 years and countless lifetimes ago. Then, for the first time since Sarah died, he placed his fingers on the keyboard and wrote a new sentence. It wasn't much. Just one line. But it was something. And sometimes, something was enough. The new sentence Ethan had written remained on his screen for 3 days before he added a second one. Progress was glacial, painful even. But it was progress nonetheless. Each morning, before Maya woke up, he'd sit at the kitchen table with his laptop and force himself to write at least one paragraph. Most of what he produced was terrible, stilted dialogue, overwrought descriptions, characters that felt hollow. But he kept going. The act of writing mattered more than the quality. He was rebuilding a muscle that had atrophied from disuse. At work, things had shifted in subtle ways. Ethan found himself checking the 10th floor directory more often, wondering if Adrienne was in her office, if she thought about their dinner the way he did. They'd exchanged a few brief emails, nothing substantial, just small observations about books or questions about editing. But they maintained professional distance during office hours. No one at Brightstone could know they were seeing each other. The complications would be immediate and severe. On Tuesday afternoon, his desk phone rang. Layla's voice came through, professional and neutral. Mr. Carter, Ms. Cole would like to schedule a follow-up meeting. Are you available Thursday at 6? The phrasing was careful, coded. 6 o'clock was after office hours. This wasn't a work meeting. Yes, I'm available. She'll meet you in the parking garage. Level 3, northwest corner. The line went dead before Ethan could respond. Thursday arrived with agonizing slowness. Ethan left work at 5:30, killing time in a nearby coffee shop before returning to the Brightstone building at 6. The parking garage was nearly empty, most employees already gone for the day. He found Adrienne's car, a sleek black Audi, parked in the far corner, away from security cameras. She was leaning against the driver's side door, dressed in dark jeans and a leather jacket he'd never seen her wear. Her hair was down again, loose around her shoulders. She looked nothing like the CEO who commanded boardrooms. Covert parking garage meetings, Ethan said as he approached. Very spy thriller. I thought about suggesting we meet in a dark alley, but that seemed excessive. She pushed off the car. Get in. I want to show you something. They drove through Portland's early evening traffic, heading west toward the hills. Adrienne navigated with confidence, taking turns without hesitation, clearly familiar with the route. She didn't explain where they were going, and Ethan didn't ask. He was beginning to understand that Adrienne revealed information on her own timeline. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of the Portland Art Museum. The building was still open, its modern glass facade glowing against the darkening sky. You said you come here alone, Ethan said. I do. But I thought maybe tonight I'd try it with company. She got out of the car and he followed. There's a new exhibition on loan from the Met, Impressionist Landscapes. I wanted to see it before it closes next week. They entered through the main doors and Adrienne purchased 2 tickets without consulting him. The museum was quiet on a Thursday evening, only a handful of visitors wandering through the galleries. Adrienne led them directly to the 3rd floor, moving with the assurance of someone who knew exactly where she was going. The exhibition occupied a large, naturally lit gallery. Dozens of paintings lined the walls: Monet, Renoir, Pissarro, names Ethan recognized but had never studied closely. Adrienne stopped in front of a Monet water lily painting, studying it with complete focus. I don't actually know much about art, Ethan admitted, standing beside her. I appreciate it, but I don't understand the technical aspects. Neither do I, really. I just like looking at things that make me feel something. She moved closer to the painting, examining the brushstrokes. Monet painted the same pond hundreds of times. Different light, different seasons, different moods. The subject never changed, but his perception of it did. I find that comforting somehow. Why? Because it suggests that even familiar things can continue to reveal new depths if you're willing to keep looking. They moved through the gallery slowly, stopping at paintings that caught Adrienne's attention. She didn't offer art historical commentary or intellectual analysis. She simply looked, and sometimes she shared what she felt. A Renoir landscape made her think of summers in her grandmother's garden. A Pissarro street scene reminded her of Paris, where she'd spent a semester abroad in college. Ethan found himself watching her more than the paintings, fascinated by this unguarded version of Adrienne Cole. In her office, she was controlled, measured, every word carefully chosen. Here, surrounded by art, she relaxed into something softer. "Can I ask you something?" he said as they stood before a painting of a country road disappearing into trees. "Always." "What changed? Between the dating profile conversation and asking me to dinner. What made you decide to delete it and take the risk?" Adrienne was quiet for a long moment, her eyes still on the painting. "Honestly, fear. Fear made you more bold?" "Fear made me realize I was tired of being careful. I've spent my entire adult life building a career, proving I could be successful without needing anyone. And I accomplished that. I became exactly what I set out to be. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that success and connection aren't mutually exclusive." She turned to face him. "When we finished that profile and I looked at it, really looked at it, I realized I was preparing to meet strangers who might or might not understand me, and you were sitting right there, someone who'd already seen past the performance. So I made a choice. Take the safe route and post the profile, or take the risk and ask you directly. I'm glad you chose risk. So am I. Although I'm still terrified I'll mess this up. That makes 2 of us." They continued through the exhibition, their conversation flowing easily between art and personal revelation. Adrienne talked about her sister, the one who'd created the dating profile. Younger by 5 years, married with 2 kids, constantly worried that Adrienne was lonely. Ethan talked about Sarah, sharing memories without the usual weight of grief. Sarah's terrible singing voice. Her habit of reorganizing his bookshelves by color instead of author. The way she'd believed in his writing even when he didn't. "She sounds wonderful," Adrienne said. She was. Maya is so much like her. Same stubborn creativity, same refusal to accept limitations. You must see her every time you look at your daughter. Every single day. Sometimes it's comforting. Sometimes it hurts. He paused in front of a painting of a sunset over a river. But I'm learning that both can be true simultaneously. When they finished viewing the exhibition, Adrienne suggested coffee at a small cafe near the museum. They sat at a corner table, away from other patrons, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics: favorite books, embarrassing childhood stories, the absurdity of corporate jargon. Ethan learned that Adrienne had a hidden fondness for terrible reality television, that she'd wanted to be an architect before falling into publishing, that she could speak passable French but terrible Spanish. "I need to tell you something," Ethan said as they finished their coffee. "I started writing again." Adrienne's expression brightened. "When?" "Friday night, after our dinner. I opened the novel I'd abandoned and wrote 1 sentence, then another. It's terrible so far, but I'm doing it." "That's not terrible, that's brave." It doesn't feel brave, it feels terrifying. Same thing, usually. She reached across the table and took his hand, a gesture that was becoming familiar. I'm proud of you. The sincerity in her voice caught him off guard. You barely know me. I know enough to recognize what it cost you to try again. She squeezed his hand before releasing it. So what's the novel about? A man trying to piece his life back together after loss. Very subtle, I know. Write what you know. That's what they say, right? They do. Although sometimes what you know is painful to write. The best art usually is. They stayed at the cafe until it closed at 9, then drove back to the parking garage where Ethan had left his car. Before he got out, Adrian turned to him. I think you should bring Maya to my place this Saturday, if you're serious about me meeting her. Ethan's stomach tightened with anxiety. Are you sure? No, I'm terrified. 8-year-olds are unpredictable, and I have no experience with children. But you were right when you said she's part of your life. If we're going to continue this, I need to know her, and she needs to decide if she likes me. What if she doesn't? Then we'll figure it out, but we won't know until we try. She gave him her address, a condo building in the Pearl District. Come around noon. I'll order lunch. Does she have any dietary restrictions? She hates mushrooms and loves anything with cheese. I can work with that. They said goodnight, and Ethan drove home with his mind racing. The relationship was accelerating faster than he'd anticipated. 3 weeks ago, Adrienne Cole had been a distant figure he saw twice a year at company meetings. Now she was inviting his daughter to her home. The speed should have terrified him. Instead, it felt inevitable, as if they were both making up for lost time. Saturday morning, Ethan woke Maya early and broke the news over breakfast. Remember that woman I went to dinner with, Adrienne? Maya looked up from her cereal, instantly alert. The smart one? Yes, she wants to meet you. I thought we could visit her today, have lunch at her place. Maya's eyes widened. Really? When? In a few hours. Is that okay with you? Can I bring my sketchbook? If you want to. I want to show her my dragon castle, and my drawings of the forest, and the one I did of you looking sad. Ethan winced. Maybe not that last one. Why? It's my best work. It's very good, but maybe we save it for another time. Maya considered this, spooning cereal into her mouth thoughtfully. Is she your girlfriend? The question was so direct it nearly made Ethan choke on his coffee. We're getting to know each other. That's what Mrs. Henderson said girlfriends are. People you get to know. Mrs. Henderson talks too much. She says you need someone to make you smile more. I smile. Not like you used to. I've seen pictures of you with Mom. You smile different. The observation pierced him. He set down his coffee cup and looked at his daughter, really looked at her. When had she become so perceptive? When had she started carrying his emotional well-being on her small shoulders? You're right, he said quietly. I haven't smiled the same way in a long time, but I'm trying to find my way back to that. Adrienne, she helps. Then I want to meet her to make sure she's good enough for you. Maya, you're 8. You don't need to screen my dates. Someone has to. You're too nice. You'll let anyone in. Ethan laughed despite himself. Where did you learn to talk like this? Mrs. Henderson. She watches a lot of talk shows. They arrived at Adrian's building at exactly noon. The Pearl District condo was in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and industrial windows. A doorman greeted them professionally and called up to announce their arrival. Moments later, they were in an elevator heading to the 8th floor. She must be really rich, Maya whispered. She works very hard, Ethan said. Is her place fancy? I don't know. I've never been here. The elevator doors opened directly into Adrian's condo, a sprawling open-concept space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. The decor was minimalist but warm, clean lines, comfortable furniture, shelves lined with books, and what looked like photographs. Adrienne stood near the kitchen island, wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater. She looked nervous, which was oddly endearing. Hi, she said, her eyes moving from Ethan to Maya. You must be Maya. Maya stepped forward with the confidence only 8-year-olds possessed. Are you Adrienne? I am. My dad says you're very smart. Your dad is kind. I'm really just good at my job. What's your job? I run a publishing company. We make books. Maya's eyes lit up. Real books? Like the ones in the library? Exactly like those. That's the coolest job ever. Maya looked around the condo with open fascination. Your house is really big. Do you live here alone? I do. Don't you get lonely? The question was so innocently delivered, but Ethan saw Adrienne's expression shift slightly. Sometimes, Adrienne admitted, but I have friends, and work keeps me busy. My dad gets lonely too, I can tell. Maya, Ethan started, but Adrienne held up a hand. It's okay. She crouched down to Maya's level. You're very observant. That's a good quality. Mrs. Henderson says I notice too much. I think you notice exactly the right amount. Adrienne stood and gestured toward the living area. I ordered pizza. I hope that's okay. Your dad said you like cheese. I love pizza. They settled in the living room, pizza boxes spread across the coffee table. Maya ate with enthusiasm while asking Adrienne a steady stream of questions. What was her favorite book? Did she have any pets? Could she draw? Had she ever met a famous author? Adrienne answered each question with patience and genuine interest, never talking down to Maya or offering simplified responses. When Maya asked about the photographs on the shelves, Adrienne walked her through them: family photos, travel pictures, a framed image of her graduating from Columbia Business School. Who's that? Maya pointed to a photograph of a distinguished-looking older man. That's my father. He passed away when I was your age. Well, a little older. I was 15. Maya studied the photo seriously. My mom died when I was 5. I don't remember her that well anymore, and that makes me sad. Adrienne sat down beside Maya on the couch. I understand that feeling. Some memories fade, and it feels like losing them all over again. Do you remember your dad? Very well. But it took me a long time to be able to think about him without being sad. Now I can remember the good parts. The way he laughed, the stories he told, the things he taught me. What did he teach you? That being smart wasn't enough. You also had to be kind and brave and willing to admit when you were wrong. Adrienne glanced at Ethan, who was watching the exchange with something close to awe. I'm still working on that last part. Maya finished her pizza and wiped her hands on a napkin. Can I show you my drawings? I'd love to see them. Maya retrieved her sketchbook from her backpack and climbed onto the couch beside Adrienne, opening to the first page. What followed was a detailed tour through an 8-year-old's imagination. Dragons with elaborate scales, castles with impossible architecture, forests filled with magical creatures. Adrienne examined each drawing carefully, asking questions about details and color choices. This is really good, she said, studying a particularly intricate dragon. Have you ever tried working with different mediums, like colored pencils or watercolors? I only have regular crayons and markers. Would you like to try something else? Maya's eyes widened. Like what? Adrienne stood and walked to a closet, returning with a leather portfolio case. She opened it to reveal an array of art supplies: professional-grade colored pencils, sketch pads, charcoal, pastels. I used to draw, Adrienne explained, before I got too busy with work. These have been sitting unused for years. Would you like to try them? Maya looked at Ethan for permission. He nodded, too moved to speak. For the next hour, Adrienne taught Maya basic techniques with colored pencils, how to layer colors, create shadows, blend tones. She was patient and encouraging, offering gentle corrections without criticism. Maya absorbed everything like a sponge, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration as she worked on a new dragon drawing. Ethan watched from the kitchen, ostensibly cleaning up the pizza boxes, but really just observing this unexpected scene. Adrienne, the woman who ran a 200-person company with ruthless efficiency, who intimidated grown men in boardrooms, was sitting cross-legged on her living room floor, showing his daughter how to shade dragon wings. Something in his chest cracked open, a feeling he couldn't quite name. Hope? Maybe. Or the terrifying recognition that he was falling for this woman faster than he'd thought possible. Dad, look! Maya held up her drawing, a dragon in flight, its wings properly shaded, its scales rendered in layers of color. Adrienne taught me how to make it look real. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Can I keep these pencils? Adrienne didn't hesitate. They're yours. On one condition. What? You have to show me your next drawing. Deal? Maya launched herself at Adrienne in an enthusiastic hug. Deal! You're the best! Adrienne looked startled for a moment, her arms hovering uncertainly before she wrapped them around Maya and returned the embrace. Over his daughter's head, her eyes met Ethan's, and in that glance he saw vulnerability and wonder, and something that looked a lot like joy. They stayed until late afternoon, the time passing effortlessly. Adrienne showed Maya her book collection, pulling down volumes with beautiful illustrations. She made hot chocolate with excessive marshmallows. She told stories about meeting authors and the chaos of book launches. Maya was enchanted, asking question after question, and Adrienne never once seemed impatient or overwhelmed. On the drive home, Maya was uncharacteristically quiet, staring out the window with her new colored pencils clutched in her lap. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked. "I like her." "Yeah?" "She's different from other grown-ups. She talks to me like I'm a real person, not a baby. She's pretty special." "Are you going to marry her?" Ethan nearly swerved into the next lane. "Maya, we've been dating for like 3 weeks." Mrs. Henderson said, "When you know, you know." Mrs. Henderson needs to stop watching romance movies. "But do you like her? Like, really like her?" Ethan thought about Adrienne's laugh when Maya had asked if dragons could be vegetarians. The way she'd crouched down to Maya's eye level for their first conversation. The patience she'd shown teaching art techniques. The vulnerability in her eyes when she'd talked about her father. "Yes," he said. "I really like her." "Good, because I think she really likes you too. And me. She gave me her fancy art stuff. That's a big deal." "It really is." That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan received a text from Adrienne. "Thank you for today. Your daughter is remarkable, sharp, creative, emotionally intelligent. You're raising an incredible human." He smiled and typed back. "She said you're the best." Direct quote. "You made quite an impression. She made one on me, too. I haven't enjoyed an afternoon that much in years." "Same. She wants to show you her next drawing. Fair warning, she takes that promise seriously. I'm counting on it." Ethan set down his phone and opened his laptop. The novel waited, 30 pages now, instead of the original 243. He'd deleted everything he'd written before Sarah died and started fresh. The new version was rougher, rawer, but it felt true in a way the original hadn't. He wrote for 2 hours, the words flowing more easily than they had in years. The story was about a widower learning to rebuild his life, yes, but it was also about a woman who'd built walls so high she'd forgotten how to let anyone in. It was about a child who saw more than adults gave her credit for. It was about second chances and the terrifying courage required to hope again. It was about all of them. The following weeks developed a rhythm. Adrienne would join them for weekend outings, trips to Powell's Books, where Maya would lose herself in the children's section while Adrienne and Ethan browsed novels. Visits to the Japanese garden, where Adrienne taught Maya about photography, using her phone camera, showing her how to frame shots and capture light. Quiet dinners at Ethan's apartment, where Adrienne would help Maya with her art projects while Ethan cooked. At work, they maintained professional distance, but the secret added an electric undercurrent to their interactions. Passing each other in hallways felt charged. Brief emails about manuscripts contained double meanings only they understood. Ethan found himself working harder, producing better edits, energized by the simple knowledge that Adrienne existed in the same building. One Friday evening, 6 weeks into their relationship, Adrienne suggested they take Maya to the Oregon coast for the weekend. She'd rented a beach house in Cannon Beach, a small town 90 minutes from Portland. "A whole weekend?" Ethan asked. "That's significant." "I know, but I want to, if you're comfortable with it." They drove down on Saturday morning, Maya chattering excitedly in the back seat about building sandcastles and finding tide pools. The beach house was modest but charming, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with ocean views, direct access to the beach. That afternoon, they walked along the shore while Maya ran ahead, collecting shells and seaweed. The famous haystack rock rose from the water in the distance, massive and ancient. Adrienne had brought her professional camera and was teaching Maya the basics of composition. "Look through here," she said, showing Maya the viewfinder. "See how the rock is framed by the sky? That's what we want to capture." Maya snapped photo after photo, completely absorbed. Ethan walked beside Adrienne, their hands occasionally brushing. "You're good with her," he said. "She makes it easy. She's curious and willing to learn. That's all any teacher can ask for." Still, not everyone would be this patient. Adrienne stopped walking and turned to face him. The wind whipped her hair around her face, and she pushed it back impatiently. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "I didn't think I wanted this. A relationship, yes, eventually. But the full package, partner and child, instant family, that terrified me. I thought it would be too much, too complicated, too demanding of my time and energy." She glanced at Maya, who was now wading in the shallow water, shrieking with delight. "But with you two, it doesn't feel like a demand. It feels like coming home to something I didn't know I was missing." Ethan's throat tightened. "Adrienne, I'm falling in love with you," she said, the words tumbling out quickly, as if she was afraid she'd lose courage if she didn't say them immediately. "Both of you, and that's terrifying because I don't know how to do this, how to be part of a family, how to be what you need. But I want to try. I want to keep trying." For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. The ocean roared behind them, waves crashing against the shore, and he felt like he was standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. "I'm falling in love with you too," he finally managed. "And yes, it's terrifying. But it's also the first thing that's felt right since Sarah died. You make me want to be brave again." Adrienne reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. "So we'll be terrified together." "Deal." Maya ran up to them, soaking wet and covered in sand. "Dad! Adrienne, come see! There's a starfish in the tide pool." They followed her to a cluster of rocks where, sure enough, a bright orange starfish clung to the stone. Maya knelt beside it, examining it with reverent fascination, and Adrienne knelt beside her, pointing out the intricate details of its arms. Ethan stood back, watching them together, and felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in 3 years. Not just happiness, though there was that. Not just hope, though there was that too. But genuine, unguarded joy. The kind that didn't come with caveats or conditions. The kind that simply existed, pure and uncomplicated. That night, after Maya fell asleep in her bedroom, Ethan and Adrienne sat on the beach house deck, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars emerge over the dark ocean. "I talked to my sister this week," Adrienne said. "Told her I was seeing someone." "What did she say?" "She was shocked, then thrilled. Then she demanded to meet you immediately." "Terrifying." "Very, but fair, I suppose. She's been worried about me for years." "Does she know about Maya?" "I told her. She cried. Apparently she's been praying I'd find someone who'd help me understand what family actually means." Adrienne laughed softly. "She's very dramatic." "Sounds like she cares about you." "She does. Excessively sometimes. But I'm grateful for it now in ways I wasn't before." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the ocean. Somewhere in the darkness, waves were reshaping the shore the way they had for millennia. Constant change, constant renewal. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for taking the risk, for letting me in. Thank you for asking me to dinner that night, for being brave first." Adrienne leaned her head on his shoulder, and Ethan wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. Above them, the stars wheeled across the sky, indifferent and eternal. But here, on this deck, in this moment, they'd carved out something small and precious and entirely their own. Hope had begun to grow, tentative but real. And for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something to build, together, one brave choice at a time. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning in late October, subtle enough that Ethan almost missed it. He was at his desk, reviewing a thriller manuscript about corporate espionage, when Rachel appeared at his cubicle with an expression he'd never seen before, something between concern and awkward discomfort. "Hey, can we talk for a second?" she asked, her voice low. Ethan removed his headphones. "Sure. What's up?" Rachel glanced around, checking that no one was within earshot, then leaned closer. "Look, I'm telling you this as a friend. People are talking." His stomach dropped. "About what?" "About you and Cole. Someone saw you two at a restaurant in the Pearl District last week, and apparently there's been some speculation about why you've been called to the 10th floor so many times lately." She held up her hands defensively. "I'm not judging. I don't care who you date. But the rumor mill is churning, and I thought you should know before it becomes a bigger thing. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. He and Adrienne had been so careful. They never met during work hours, never acknowledged each other beyond professional necessity, never gave anyone reason to suspect, but of course they'd been seen. Portland wasn't that big. Brightstone employees lived all over the city. Thanks for the heads up, he managed. Just be careful, okay? You know how HR gets about workplace relationships, especially when there's a power differential. After Rachel left, Ethan sat frozen at his desk, his mind racing. The manuscript in front of him might as well have been written in a foreign language. All he could think about was how quickly this could spiral. Adrienne could lose credibility. He could be accused of favoritism, even though she'd never given him any professional advantages. Maya could hear gossip from someone at school whose parent worked at Brightstone. The carefully constructed peace they'd built over the past 2 months suddenly felt fragile as glass. He pulled out his phone and texted Adrienne, "We need to talk, tonight if possible." Her response came 5 minutes later. "My place, 7:30. Everything okay?" "Not sure yet." He spent the rest of the day in a fog of anxiety, barely able to concentrate. At 5 o'clock, he picked up Maya from school, helped her with homework, made dinner, and tried to act normal even though his mind was spinning. At 7, he dropped Maya with Mrs. Henderson, who took one look at his face and asked no questions. Adrienne answered her door immediately when he knocked, still wearing her work clothes, charcoal suit, her hair pulled back severely. But her expression was soft with concern. "What happened?" she asked, pulling him inside. Ethan explained what Rachel had told him, watching Adrienne's face shift from concern to something harder, more calculating. She walked to her kitchen island and poured 2 glasses of wine, handing him one before taking a long drink from her own. "This was inevitable," she said finally. "I knew it would happen eventually. I just hoped we'd have more time." "What do we do?" "Honestly, I don't know. The company policy is clear. Relationships between supervisors and subordinates have to be disclosed to HR. And in most cases, one party has to transfer departments or one of us has to leave. You're the CEO. I'm 7 levels below you on the organizational chart. We don't have a direct reporting relationship. Doesn't matter. The perception is what matters. If people think you're getting preferential treatment because we're together, it undermines both of our credibility." She set down her wine glass with more force than necessary. "I should have thought this through before I asked you to dinner. I should have considered the consequences." "Adrienne, don't. I'm the one who initiated this. I'm the one who should have known better. You're the one who's going to pay the price if this blows up." Ethan crossed to her, taking both her hands. "We're in this together. We make decisions together. That's what we agreed." "And what do you suggest we do? Go to HR and ask for permission? Hope they'll be understanding?" "They won't be. They'll see liability, potential lawsuits, favoritism claims. The safest corporate solution is to separate us. Then we'll transfer departments. I'll move to a different division. Problem solved." "It's not that simple. Any transfer I authorize for you will look like favoritism. And if you request it yourself, people will assume you're being pushed out." Adrienne pulled her hands free and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. "The truth is, there's no clean solution here. Someone loses no matter what we do." The weight of her words settled over him like a physical thing. "So what are you saying?" She didn't turn around. "I'm saying I need to think about this strategically. As much as I hate it, I have a responsibility to the company, to the 200 people who work there. I can't let my personal life compromise that." "Your personal life isn't a liability. We're 2 adults in a relationship." "You know it's more complicated than that." "Only because we're making it complicated." Now she did turn, and her expression was the one she wore in boardrooms, controlled, distant, unreachable. "Ethan, I run a publishing house in an industry that's struggling. I've spent 15 years building Brightstone into what it is. I can't afford scandals or whisper campaigns or HR investigations. The board is already breathing down my neck about quarterly numbers. If they think I'm distracted by a workplace romance, they'll use it against me." "So what? We just end this? Pretend the last 2 months didn't happen?" "No, but we need to be smart about how we proceed." "Smart meaning what?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I think I should transfer you to a different department. Make it look like a lateral move, a professional opportunity. It removes the direct conflict of interest and gives us plausible deniability. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the chest. You want to transfer me without asking me first? I don't want to do anything, but I'm trying to protect both of us. By making unilateral decisions that affect my career? That's not protecting me, Adrienne. That's controlling the situation without my input. Her jaw tightened. Someone has to think strategically here. And you assume I can't? That I need you to manage this for me like I'm one of your employees? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're making choices about my life without consulting me, which is exactly what you told me you'd never do. The silence that followed was toxic. Adrienne stood rigid by the window, her arms crossed defensively. Ethan remained near the kitchen island, his hands clenched at his sides. The distance between them felt vast. I'm trying to fix this, Adrienne said finally, her voice cold. You're trying to control it. There's a difference. So what's your solution? We go to HR together, hand in hand, and hope for the best? That's naive, Ethan. The corporate world doesn't reward honesty. It rewards plausible deniability and managed optics. I don't care about optics. I care about us making decisions together, like we promised. Well, maybe that promise was idealistic. Maybe in the real world, someone has to make the hard calls. And you've decided that someone is you. Adrienne's expression hardened further. Yes, because I have more experience navigating corporate politics. Because I understand the stakes better than you do, and because someone needs to protect your career even if you're too stubborn to see it. Protect my career by controlling my choices? That's not protection, that's condescension. Fine. Adrienne's voice turned sharp, cutting. Then tell me your plan. How do we handle this in a way that doesn't destroy everything we've both worked for? We talked to HR together. We explained the situation honestly. We ask for their guidance on how to proceed within company policy. And we make whatever decision comes next as a team, not as CEO and subordinate. That's incredibly naive. Maybe. But at least it's honest. Honesty doesn't pay bills or protect jobs. Neither does making unilateral decisions that break trust. They stared at each other across the room, the air between them crackling with hurt and anger. This was their first real fight, and it cut deeper than Ethan had expected. Not because they disagreed about the solution, but because of what the disagreement revealed. Fundamental differences in how they approached problems, how they valued autonomy versus protection, how they balanced personal relationships against professional obligations. I think I should go, Ethan said quietly. Ethan, no. You've made your position clear. You're going to transfer me because you think it's the best solution, regardless of what I want. And honestly, I need some space to think about what that means for us. Adrienne's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something raw underneath. Don't do this. Don't walk away angry. I'm not angry. I'm hurt. And I need time to process that. He left before she could respond, taking the elevator down to the parking garage with his heart hammering. The drive home passed in a blur. When he arrived at Mrs. Henderson's apartment to pick up Maya, the elderly woman took one look at him and simply handed over his daughter without questions. Maya fell asleep in the car on the short drive home. Ethan carried her to bed, tucked her in, and then collapsed on his couch, staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed with the text from Adrienne, but he couldn't bring himself to read it. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. The next morning, Ethan called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. He couldn't face the office, couldn't face the possibility of seeing Adrienne in the elevator or hearing the whispers from colleagues. Maya stayed home from school, sensing something was wrong, even if she couldn't articulate what. They spent the day doing nothing important, watching movies, drawing pictures, eating cereal for lunch. Around 3 in the afternoon, Maya climbed onto the couch beside him. Are you sad because of Adrienne? She asked. There was no point in lying. Yeah, kiddo. We had a disagreement. About what? About work stuff. Grown-up complications. Maya was quiet for a moment, processing. Are you still going to see her? I don't know yet. Do you want to? The question was so simple, so direct, so perfectly Maya, and it cut right to the heart of everything. Yes, Ethan admitted, but sometimes wanting something isn't enough. Sometimes there are problems that are hard to solve. Mrs. Henderson says all problems can be solved if people talk to each other. Mrs. Henderson is very wise. Then why don't you talk to Adrienne? Because right now I'm too hurt to know what to say. Maya leaned against his shoulder, her small body warm and solid. I miss her. She was teaching me about photography. She said she'd show me how to develop pictures in a dark room. The simple statement hit Ethan harder than any argument. Maya had let Adrienne in. She'd formed an attachment, built expectations, allowed herself to hope for continuity. And now, because of corporate policies and his own wounded pride, that relationship was in jeopardy. He'd spent 3 years protecting Maya from loss, from pain, from the possibility of loving someone who might leave. And then he'd brought Adrienne into their lives and let his daughter believe it was safe to care. What kind of father did that make him? Thursday morning, Ethan received an email from HR requesting a meeting at 2 o'clock that afternoon. The message was professionally worded but unmistakably serious. He dressed carefully, arrived early, and sat in the small conference room trying not to spiral into worst-case scenarios. Jennifer Park, the head of HR, entered with a thick folder and a neutral expression that revealed nothing. Mr. Carter, thank you for coming. She sat across from him, opening the folder. I'll get straight to the point. It's come to our attention that you may be involved in a personal relationship with Adrienne Cole. Is that accurate? Ethan's throat went dry. Yes. How long has this relationship been ongoing? About 2 months. And during this time, has Ms. Cole shown you any preferential treatment? Salary increases, promotions, favorable project assignments? No, nothing. She's never given me any professional advantage. Jennifer made notes in her file. Nevertheless, the company policy is clear. Relationships between employees at significantly different levels of seniority must be disclosed and managed to avoid conflicts of interest. Ms. Cole has already spoken to me about this situation. She's proposed transferring you to the nonfiction department under Gary Chen's supervision. This would eliminate the direct chain of command concern. Ethan felt his hands clench. Adrienne had done it, made the decision without him, just like she'd said she would. Did she ask you to have this meeting? He asked, his voice tight. Ms. Cole reported the relationship is required by company policy. The transfer is her proposed solution to maintain compliance. But I need to ask you directly, are you comfortable with this arrangement? The question caught him off guard. He'd expected to be told what would happen, not asked his opinion. I'd like to think about it, he said carefully. Can I have some time? Of course. I'll need an answer by Monday. And Mr. Carter, for what it's worth, I've reviewed your personnel file. Your work has been exemplary. This situation doesn't change that. Whatever happens with the relationship, your job performance speaks for itself. Ethan left the meeting feeling hollowed out. He returned to his desk, packed his things, and left early, claiming a doctor's appointment. At home, he found 3 missed calls from Adrienne and a text that simply read, I'm sorry, we need to talk, please. He didn't respond. Friday passed in a haze. Ethan went through the motions, work, school pickup, dinner, bedtime routine, but his mind was elsewhere. Maya asked twice if he was okay. Mrs. Henderson asked once, her eyes too knowing. He lied to both of them. Saturday morning, someone knocked on his apartment door. Ethan opened it to find Adrienne standing in the hallway, wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair loose, her expression vulnerable in a way he'd never seen. Can I come in? She asked. Maya's here. I know. I want to talk to both of you. He stepped aside, letting her enter. Maya looked up from her drawing at the kitchen table and immediately brightened. Adrienne. She ran over for a hug, which Adrienne returned with visible emotion. Hi, sweetheart. I've missed you. I missed you too. Are you here to teach me more photography? Not today, but maybe soon. Right now I need to talk to your dad about some important things. Is that okay? Maya looked between them, her intuitive 8-year-old brain clearly processing the tension. Are you fighting? We had a disagreement, Adrienne said gently, but I'm here to try to fix it. Good, because Dad's been really sad. Maya, Ethan started, but Adrienne held up a hand. She's right. I made you sad, and I owe you an apology. She turned to Maya. Can we borrow the living room for a bit? Maybe you could draw in your room? Maya considered this, then nodded seriously. Okay, but you have to make up. I don't want you to stop being friends. We'll try our best. After Maya disappeared into her bedroom, Adrienne sat on the couch and Ethan took the chair across from her, maintaining distance. She looked smaller somehow, less formidable without the armor of her CEO persona. I messed up, she said without preamble. I went to HR and proposed the transfer without talking to you first. I told myself I was protecting you, but really, I was just doing what I always do, taking control because it feels safer than trusting someone else to help solve the problem. She met his eyes. You were right. It was condescending, and it violated the promise we made to make decisions together. Ethan wanted to hold on to his anger, his hurt, but the sincerity in her voice undermined his defenses. Why did you do it? Because I was scared. When you told me about the rumors, all I could think about was how quickly this could destroy everything. Your career, my credibility, the company's stability. And my default response to fear is to control the variables, to make the hard choices before anyone else can make them for me. She leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly. But in doing that, I hurt you. I treated you like a problem to be managed instead of a partner whose opinion matters. And I'm sorry. I got the email from HR, Ethan said quietly. They said you proposed the transfer. I did. But I want you to know, if you don't want to transfer, if you want to handle this a different way, I'll support that. Even if it means I have to step back from the company, even if it means facing consequences. You'd leave Brightstone? I'd do a lot of things to make this right. Because I love you, Ethan, and I love Maya. And I don't want to lose you both because I was too controlling to trust you. The words hung in the air between them. Ethan felt the last of his anger dissolve, replaced by something more complicated. Relief mixed with lingering hurt, love tangled with fear. I love you too, he said. But, Adrienne, if we're going to make this work, I need to know you won't make major decisions about our lives without talking to me first. I need to be an equal partner, not someone you're managing. I know, and I'll do better. I promise. She paused. What do you want to do about the transfer? Ethan considered the question carefully. The transfer would solve the immediate problem. It would quiet the rumors, satisfy HR, allow them to continue their relationship without corporate complications. But it also felt like capitulation, like letting fear dictate their choices. I think we should accept it, he said finally. Not because you decided it for us, but because it's actually a good solution. Gary Chen runs a great department. The work would be interesting, and it removes the conflict of interest without either of us having to leave the company. You're sure? I'm sure, but I need you to know, I'm not doing this because you told me to. I'm doing it because we discussed it, and I agree it's the right choice. There's a difference. I understand. And from now on, we discuss everything first. No more unilateral decisions. Deal. Maya appeared in the doorway, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. Are you done fighting? Adrienne opened her arms. Come here, sweetheart. Maya ran over and climbed onto the couch beside Adrienne, who wrapped an arm around her. Your dad and I had a disagreement about some grown-up stuff, Adrienne explained, but we talked about it, and we're going to work it out. Sometimes people who love each other fight. It doesn't mean they stop loving each other. My mom and dad used to fight sometimes, Maya said quietly. I remember. But then they always made up. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He'd forgotten Maya had those memories. She'd been so young when Sarah died. That's right, he said. People who love each other work through their problems. They don't give up just because things get hard. Maya looked up at Adrienne. Do you love my dad? I do, very much. And me? And you, very much. Maya smiled, satisfied. Good, because I love you too, and I don't want you to go away. Adrienne's eyes glistened, and she pulled Maya closer. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. But even as she said it, Ethan saw the shadow that crossed her face. He recognized it because he felt it too. The fear that promises, no matter how sincere, couldn't protect against all the ways things could fall apart. They spent the rest of the weekend together, carefully rebuilding what had cracked. Adrienne taught Maya how to use a light meter on her camera. They went to the art museum and looked at a new sculpture exhibition. They made dinner together in Ethan's small kitchen, working around each other with increasing ease. On Sunday night, after Maya was asleep, they sat on Ethan's couch, exhausted but tentatively hopeful. "Monday I'll tell HR I'm accepting the transfer," Ethan said. "It'll take a few weeks to process, but it'll happen. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we keep being careful at work. We keep making decisions together. And we trust that we can handle whatever comes next." Adrienne took his hand. "I'm sorry again for all of it. I know, and I forgive you. But Adrienne, don't do it again. I can't be with someone who makes choices for me, even with good intentions." "I won't. I promise." They sat in silence, both acutely aware of how close they'd come to losing everything. The fight had revealed fractures in their foundation: Adrienne's need for control, Ethan's sensitivity about autonomy, the complicated power dynamics of their relationship. They'd patched the cracks, but the scars remained, a reminder that love required constant attention, constant communication, constant willingness to be vulnerable, even when it hurt. The transfer processed quickly. By mid-November, Ethan was officially part of the nonfiction department, working under Gary Chen's supervision. The change was jarring at first: new colleagues, different types of manuscripts, a workspace on the 8th floor instead of the 7th. But Gary was a good manager, the team was welcoming, and the work itself was interesting in new ways. The rumors at Brightstone didn't disappear entirely, but they quieted. People moved on to newer gossip. Ethan's relationship with Adrienne became old news, especially once the transfer made it clear the company had handled the conflict of interest appropriately. But despite the resolution, something had shifted. The easy joy of their first few months had been complicated by the fight, by the realization that loving each other didn't mean understanding each other perfectly. They still saw each other regularly, still spent weekends with Maya, still talked late into the night. But there was a caution now, a wariness, as if they were both waiting for the next crisis to test them. Maya felt it too. She asked fewer questions about the future, drew fewer pictures that included all three of them. She loved Adrienne still. That was obvious in her enthusiasm when Adrienne visited, her constant requests for photography lessons, her delight in showing off new drawings. But she'd learned that loving someone didn't guarantee they'd stay. And Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that despite their promises, despite their best intentions, they were all just waiting for the other shoe to drop. The caution that settled over their relationship persisted through Thanksgiving and into December. They were still together, still shared dinners, still attended Maya's school events as a unit, still texted throughout the day. But the spontaneity had vanished, replaced by a careful politeness that felt safe but hollow. They were dancing around each other, both afraid to push too hard, both terrified of triggering another fracture. Maya noticed first, of course. She always did. It was a Friday evening in mid-December, 2 weeks before Christmas. Adrienne had come over for dinner, as she did most Fridays now. Ethan had made pasta, Maya's favorite, and they'd eaten together at the small kitchen table, making small talk about work and school. The conversation was pleasant but surface level, lacking the depth that had characterized their early dinners together. After they finished eating, Maya excused herself to work on a drawing in her room. Ethan started clearing dishes while Adrienne helped, and they moved around the kitchen in synchronized silence. It wasn't until Ethan was elbow-deep in soapy water that Adrienne finally spoke. "We're being too careful," she said quietly. Ethan looked over his shoulder at her. "What do you mean?" "This, us. We're so afraid of hurting each other again that we've stopped being honest. We've stopped pushing each other. We're just existing alongside each other instead of actually being together." He turned off the water and dried his hands, leaning against the counter. "You noticed it too." "Of course I did. I've been waiting for you to say something, but you've been waiting for me to say something, and meanwhile we're both just..." She gestured helplessly. "Pretending everything is fine when it's not. I don't want to fight again. Neither do I. But I'd rather fight than feel like we're walking on eggshells every time we're together." Adrienne crossed her arms, a defensive gesture she'd been using more frequently lately. "I miss us. The way we were before, when we could say anything to each other. That was before we knew how much we could hurt each other. And now we do know. But we're still here. Doesn't that count for something?" Before Ethan could respond, Maya appeared in the doorway holding a piece of paper. She walked directly to the kitchen table and set it down, looking at both of them with an expression far too serious for an 8-year-old. "What's this, sweetheart?" Adrienne asked. It's something I need to show you. They both moved to the table. The drawing was done in colored pencil, the expensive ones Adrienne had given Maya months ago. It showed three figures standing in front of a house. Ethan recognized himself immediately, tall, dark hair, wearing his usual jeans and button-down shirt. Maya had drawn herself in the middle, holding hands with both adults. And on the other side was Adrienne, her features carefully rendered, her hair loose the way Maya had seen it on weekends. But what made Ethan's breath catch was what Maya had drawn above their heads. Small storm clouds hovered over each adult figure, with tiny raindrops falling. Only Maya stood in sunshine. Why did you draw the rain? Adrienne asked gently. Because you're both sad, even when you pretend you're not. I can tell. Maya looked between them with those two knowing eyes. You smile, but it doesn't reach all the way. Not like it used to. Ethan crouched down beside his daughter. We're not sad, honey. We're just working through some complicated grown-up stuff. But you're working through it separately. You used to talk about everything. Now you just talk about nothing important. She pointed at the drawing. I drew us in front of a house because I thought maybe someday we could all live together, but now I don't know if that will happen, because you're both too scared to tell each other what you really feel. The observation was so astute, so painfully accurate, that Ethan felt tears prick at his eyes. When had his daughter become so perceptive? When had she started carrying the weight of their relationship on her small shoulders? Adrienne pulled out a chair and sat down, her professional composure cracking. Maya, I need you to understand something. Your dad and I love each other very much, and we both love you. But sometimes adults get scared. We worry about making mistakes or saying the wrong thing, and that fear can make us pull back when we should be leaning in. But that's silly. If you love each other, you should just tell each other the truth. That's what you told me to do when I was scared to show Mrs. Henderson my drawings because I thought they weren't good enough. You're absolutely right, Adrienne said. Sometimes kids are smarter than adults. Maya studied them both for a moment, then picked up her drawing. I'm going to put this on the fridge, so every time you see it, you remember that you're supposed to be honest with each other. Okay? Okay, Ethan managed. After Maya returned to her room, Ethan and Adrienne sat at the kitchen table in heavy silence. The drawing now hung on the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a rainbow. The storm clouds seemed to mock them. She's right, Adrienne said finally. We've been so careful that we've stopped being real with each other. I know. I just didn't know how to fix it without risking another fight. So instead, we've been slowly suffocating this relationship with politeness and caution. She reached across the table and took his hand. Ethan, I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to spend the rest of our lives being afraid to be honest with each other. What are you actually feeling right now? Not what you think you should feel, what you really feel. Adrienne took a deep breath. I'm terrified every single day. I'm terrified that I'll make another unilateral decision and you'll realize you can't trust me. I'm terrified that my work will get too demanding and you'll feel neglected. I'm terrified that Maya will get hurt because we couldn't make this work. And I'm terrified that I'm not cut out for this, for being part of a family, for being the kind of partner you deserve, for being someone a child can depend on. The raw vulnerability in her voice shattered something in Ethan's chest. Do you want to know what I'm terrified of? Tell me. I'm terrified that I'll never stop comparing you to Sarah. That some part of me will always be waiting for you to leave, because the person I loved most in the world was taken from me without warning. I'm terrified that I'll teach Maya to be afraid of loving people because I'm so afraid myself. And I'm terrified that you'll wake up one day and realize that being with a widower and his baggage-laden daughter is too much work. Ethan, I'm not finished. I'm also terrified that I'll do what I always do, build walls and call it protection, choose safety over happiness, convince myself that the controlled, careful life is better than risking my heart again. Because that's what I've been doing these past few weeks, building walls, being careful. And in the process, I've been pushing away the best thing that's happened to me since Sarah died. Adrienne's eyes glistened with unshed tears. So what do? We stop being careful. We stop protecting ourselves from each other. We take the risk of being completely honest, even when it's scary. He squeezed her hand, and we decide right now, together, that we're in this for real, not the cautious, walking on eggshells version, the messy, complicated, all-in version. That's terrifying. I know, But I'd rather be terrified together than safe and alone. Adrienne stood and walked around the table, pulling Ethan to his feet. She wrapped her arms around him, and he held her close, feeling the tension that had lived in his shoulders for weeks finally begin to release. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "Not the version of you that's easy or uncomplicated. The real you. The one who's still grieving and scared and trying to figure out how to be a single father while also being a person who deserves happiness. I love you too, the real you. The one who needs control because she's scared of being hurt. The one who works too much and doesn't know how to let people in. The one who's learning how to be part of something bigger than herself." They stood in the kitchen, holding each other while the clock on the wall ticked steadily, and Maya's drawing watched from the refrigerator. After a long moment, Adrienne pulled back slightly. "I think we need to make some decisions," she said, "real ones, about what we want this relationship to look like." "Okay, what do you want?" "I want to stop sneaking around. I want people at work to know we're together. I want to take Maya to meet my sister and her family. I want to spend holidays together, not awkwardly splitting time. I want to talk about the future without being afraid to say what I'm hoping for." "What are you hoping for?" She looked at him directly. "I'm hoping that someday, maybe not immediately, but someday, we could live together. That Maya's drawing of us standing in front of a house could be real. That we could build something permanent instead of just dating indefinitely." Ethan felt his heart rate increase. "You're talking about getting serious. I thought we were already serious. But if you mean marriage, moving in together, actually merging our lives, then yes, that's what I want. Eventually. When we're ready." She paused. "Is that something you could want too?" He thought about Sarah, about the life they'd planned that had been cut short. For 3 years, he'd believed that chapter of his life was over, that he'd never want those things again. But standing here with Adrienne, feeling the warmth of her hands in his, seeing Maya's drawing on the refrigerator, he realized he did want it. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not the exact same future he'd imagined with Sarah, but a future, a real one, with room for all of them. "Yes," he said, "that's something I could want, that I do want. Even though it's scary, especially because it's scary. Because the things worth having are usually the things that terrify us most." They talked late into the night after Maya went to sleep, having the honest conversation they should have had weeks ago. Adrienne admitted she'd been pulling back emotionally, afraid to invest too deeply in case things fell apart. Ethan admitted he'd been doing the same, convincing himself it was for Maya's protection when really it was for his own. They talked about their fears, their hopes, their frustrations with how they'd handled the conflict at work. "I should have called you immediately when HR contacted me," Adrienne said, "instead of trying to fix it alone. And I should have told you I was hurt instead of shutting down and avoiding you. We both messed up. So how do we do better next time? We call each other out when we're being too careful. We push each other to be honest even when it's uncomfortable. And we trust that fighting doesn't mean we're falling apart. It just means we care enough to work through things." By the time Adrienne left that night, something had fundamentally shifted. The caution was gone, replaced by a renewed commitment to showing up fully, honestly, messily. It wasn't comfortable, but it was real. The next week, Ethan finished his novel. 217 pages of raw, honest storytelling about grief and second chances, and the courage required to love again after loss. He didn't know if it was any good, but it was done, and that mattered. He sent it to Adrienne on a Thursday evening with a simple message. "This is everything I couldn't say out loud. Read it when you have time." Her response came 3 days later. "I read it in one sitting. It's beautiful and heartbreaking and real. Can we talk about it?" They met at her condo on Sunday afternoon while Maya was at a birthday party. Adrienne had printed the manuscript and covered it in sticky notes, observations, questions, emotional reactions. "This character," she said, pointing to a section in the middle of the novel, "the woman he falls for after his wife dies. She's afraid of vulnerability, afraid she'll never be good enough, afraid she doesn't know how to be what he needs." Yeah, that's me, isn't it? Parts of her are you, parts are what I imagine you feel, parts are what I needed to write to understand you better. Adrienne set down the manuscript and looked at him. There's a scene near the end where she tells him she's terrified of losing him, and he tells her that the fear is proof she's brave enough to try. Did you mean that? Every word. Then I need to tell you something. I've been offered a position in New York, editorial director at one of the major houses. It's a huge opportunity, the kind of job I would have killed for 5 years ago. Ethan felt his stomach drop. When? They approached me last month. I've been stalling on giving them an answer because I didn't know how to tell you. She moved closer to him. And because I realized something, 5 years ago, I would have taken it without hesitation. But now? Now I have reasons to stay. You, Maya. This life we're building. You can't turn down a job like that because of us. I'm not turning it down because of you. I'm turning it down because I don't want it anymore. I thought I wanted to climb higher, achieve more, prove I could reach the absolute top of my field. But what I actually want is to build something here, with you, with Maya. A life that's about more than just professional success. Adrienne, are you sure? Because I don't want you to resent me in 5 years for the opportunities you gave up. I'm sure. Besides, Portland has everything I need. A good job that I'm genuinely proud of. A city I love. And a future I actually want to wake up for. She took his hands. I'm choosing this, Ethan. I'm choosing us. Not because I have to, but because I want to. He pulled her close, holding her tight, feeling the last of his doubts dissolve. She was choosing them. Actively, deliberately, with full knowledge of what she was giving up. And that choice meant everything. Christmas arrived with unexpected warmth. Adrienne met Maya's school friends at the holiday pageant, sitting beside Ethan and applauding enthusiastically when Maya spoke her 2 lines as reindeer number 4. She joined them for Christmas Eve dinner at Mrs. Henderson's apartment, charming the elderly neighbor with stories about the publishing industry and admiring the extensive porcelain angel collection. On Christmas morning, they exchanged gifts at Ethan's apartment. Maya gave Adrienne a framed photograph she'd taken herself. The 3 of them at the beach in Cannon Beach, Haystack Rock in the background, all of them laughing at something Maya had said behind the camera. Adrienne gave Maya a professional-grade camera with a note promising weekly photography lessons. And Ethan gave Adrienne a first edition of her favorite book, a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt that he'd tracked down through 3 different rare book dealers. This is too much, Adrienne said, turning the precious volume carefully in her hands. It's perfect. You're worth it. But the real gift came later, after Maya had fallen asleep surrounded by new art supplies and books. Adrienne and Ethan sat on the couch, the colored lights from the small Christmas tree casting a warm glow. I have something else for you, Adrienne said, pulling a small box from her purse. It's not a ring, she added quickly, seeing Ethan's expression. We're not there yet. But it's a promise. Inside the box was a key. It's to my condo, Adrienne explained. I want you to have it. Not because I expect you to move in tomorrow, but because I want you to know you're always welcome. That my space is your space. That I'm serious about building a future together. Ethan felt his throat tighten. I have something for you too. He pulled out an envelope from beneath the couch cushion and handed it to her. Inside was a letter, handwritten on the good paper he'd bought specifically for this purpose. Adrienne read it silently, her eyes moving across the page. It was everything he'd wanted to say but had been too afraid to voice. How she'd brought him back to life. How Maya loved her in ways that went beyond simple fondness. How he wanted to build a future that included all 3 of them. How he was ready to stop protecting himself from happiness and start embracing it instead. When she finished reading, tears were streaming down her face. This is the most romantic thing anyone has ever given me, she said. A letter? An honest letter, one that doesn't hide or hold back or pretend, one that trusts me with your whole heart. She set the letter down carefully and kissed him. Thank you. Thank you for being patient while I figured out how to trust again. They spent New Year's Eve at Adrienne's condo with her sister and brother-in-law and their 2 kids. Maya hit it off immediately with Adrienne's niece, a 10-year-old aspiring artist who wanted to see all of Maya's drawings. The adults drank wine and talked about everything and nothing while the kids created an elaborate art project in the spare bedroom. At midnight, when the clock struck 12 and the city erupted in celebration, Ethan pulled Adrienne close and kissed her while fireworks exploded over the river. Happy New Year, she whispered. Happy New Beginning, he replied. January brought changes. Adrienne started spending more time at Ethan's apartment, keeping a toothbrush in the bathroom and clothes in his closet. Maya started calling her by her first name naturally, without the hesitation that had characterized their early interactions. They developed routines: Saturday morning pancakes at Ethan's place, Sunday afternoon museum visits, weeknight dinners that rotated between their apartments. In February, Ethan's novel found an agent, a small literary agency in Seattle that specialized in commercial fiction with emotional depth. The agent loved the manuscript, called it raw and honest and deeply moving, and promised to start sending it to editors immediately. "I can't believe this is happening," Ethan told Adrienne over dinner that night. "I can. You're talented. You deserve this." "What if it doesn't sell?" "Then you write another one, until something clicks. That's how this works." She reached across the table. "But Ethan, even if nothing ever gets published, I'm proud of you for finishing it, for being brave enough to put words on paper again." 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Ethan's agent called with news. 3 editors wanted the book. There would be an auction. By Friday, he had a 2-book deal with a major publisher. The advance was enough to pay off his car, build a college fund for Maya, and buy himself time to write the second novel without financial stress. When he told Maya, she squealed and hugged him so hard he nearly fell over. "We have to celebrate," she announced. "Can Adrienne come?" Of course she can. They celebrated at the same Italian restaurant where Ethan and Adrienne had their first dinner, Osteria Marzano, where everything had started. Maya insisted on ordering the most expensive dessert, a chocolate creation that came to the table on fire, and they toasted with sparkling cider while Adrienne took photographs on her phone. "I'm proud of you," Adrienne said later, after Maya had fallen asleep in the car on the drive home. "Not just for the book deal, but for having the courage to try again, to write and love and hope, even when it was terrifying. I couldn't have done it without you. You reminded me that I was allowed to live again." "You reminded yourself. I just asked the question." In March, Adrienne's lease came up for renewal. She stood in her condo one Saturday morning, looking around at the space she'd lived in for 6 years. "I'm not going to renew," she told Ethan. He looked up from his coffee, surprised. "What?" "I want to find a new place, somewhere with more space, maybe a house with a yard, room for all of us." "Adrienne, are you saying—" "I'm saying I want us to move in together. Officially. Not me staying over at your place or you keeping a toothbrush at mine, actually living together as a family." She sat down beside him. "I know it's fast. I know we've only been dating for 8 months. But I'm sure about this. About us. And I don't want to waste more time being cautious when I could be building the life I actually want." Ethan felt his heart race. "What about Maya? Have you thought about what it means to live with an 8-year-old full-time?" "I have. It means early mornings and homework help and attending every school event. It means being there for good days and bad days, for excitement and boredom and everything in between. It means being a parent figure, even though I'm not her biological mother. And yes, that's terrifying, but I want it anyway. She'd be over the moon." "Is that a yes?" "That's a hell yes," they told Maya that evening. She looked between them with wide eyes, processing the information. "So we'd all live together? Like a real family?" "Like a real family," Adrienne confirmed. Maya was quiet for a long moment, and Ethan started to worry. Then she said, "Can I pick the color for my new room?" They all laughed, the tension breaking. "You can pick whatever color you want," Adrienne promised. Maya threw her arms around both of them, squeezing tight. "This is the best thing ever." They found a house in early April, a 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood near Maya's school. It had a fenced yard, a garage Ethan could convert into a writing studio, and enough space for all of them to spread out without feeling cramped. The kitchen was outdated and the bathroom needed work, but it had good bones and a warmth that felt immediately like home. On moving day, Mrs. Henderson came by with cookies and unsolicited advice about furniture placement. Maya's room was painted purple at her insistence, with one wall designated for displaying her art. Ethan's study had built-in bookshelves and a window overlooking the backyard. Adrienne's office was smaller but perfectly functional, with space for her photography equipment and a desk where she could work from home when needed. That first night, after all the boxes were unpacked and Maya was asleep in her new purple room, Ethan and Adrienne stood in their bedroom, their actual shared bedroom, and looked at each other in wonder. "We did it," Adrienne said. We really did. Are you happy? Happier than I ever thought I'd be again. She kissed him softly. Me too. Summer arrived with long golden days. They developed new routines as a household. Saturday morning farmers market trips, Sunday afternoon yard work, weeknight dinners where they all took turns cooking. Maya started a photography club at school, inspired by Adrian's lessons. Ethan wrote every morning in his studio, pages accumulating steadily for the second book. Adrian found a better work-life balance, leaving the office at reasonable hours and rarely checking email after dinner. On a warm evening in July, they sat in the backyard after dinner. Maya was showing them her latest photographs, a series she'd taken of the neighborhood, capturing details most people overlooked. A cat sleeping in a window, flowers growing through a crack in the sidewalk, an elderly couple holding hands on their evening walk. These are extraordinary, Adrian said, examining each image carefully. You have a real eye for finding beauty in ordinary moments. You taught me that. You said the best photographs tell stories. Well, these tell beautiful stories. Maya beamed with pride, then excused herself to work on a new drawing. After she left, Adrian leaned against Ethan's shoulder. Do you ever think about Sarah? She asked quietly. The question didn't sting the way it might have a year ago. Yeah, not as much as I used to, but yeah. Sometimes I'll remember something she said or the way she laughed, and I miss her all over again. Does it bother you that I asked? No. I'm glad you feel comfortable asking. He turned to look at her. For a long time, I thought loving someone new meant forgetting Sarah, that I had to choose between honoring her memory and moving forward. But I've realized that's not how it works. My heart didn't replace her with you. It just grew bigger, big enough to hold both the past and the present. I like that your heart grew bigger. It had help. He kissed the top of her head. You taught me that it was okay to hope again, that wanting happiness didn't make me a bad father or a disloyal husband. You gave me permission to live. You gave yourself permission. I just asked the question. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere inside, Maya was drawing or photographing or creating something beautiful. The house around them hummed with the quiet sounds of a life being lived. The refrigerator's gentle whir, the creak of floorboards, the distant sound of neighbors laughing in their own backyard. In September, Ethan's book was published. The launch party was held at Powell's Books, Portland's famous independent bookstore. The turnout exceeded everyone's expectations. Colleagues from Brightstone, friends from Maya's school, Mrs. Henderson in her best cardigan, Adrian's sister and her family. Even some of Ethan's old writing group friends, people he hadn't seen in years, showed up to support him. Maya sat in the front row, beaming with pride as her father read from his novel. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. During the Q&A session, someone asked what had inspired him to return to writing after such a long hiatus. Ethan looked at Adrian and Maya, sitting together in the audience. I stopped writing because I lost someone I loved, and it felt like I'd lost the part of myself that could create stories, he said. But I started again because I met people who reminded me that life doesn't end with loss. It transforms. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to risk your heart again, it transforms into something even more beautiful than what you had before. After the event, they walked through downtown Portland as a family, Maya between them, holding both their hands. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement. It had rained earlier, the way it always did in Portland, and the air smelled like coffee and possibilities. Dad? Maya said as they walked. Yeah, kiddo. I'm proud of you, for writing your book, for being brave. Ethan's throat tightened. Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything to me. And Adrian? Yes? I'm glad you came to dinner that night. I'm glad you didn't give up on us when things got hard. Adrian stopped walking and crouched down to Maya's level. I would never give up on you, either of you. You're my family now, and families stick together, even when things are difficult. Promise? Promise. Maya hugged her, and Ethan wrapped his arms around both of them, holding his family close while the city moved around them. That night, after Maya was asleep, Adrian found the old drawing that had hung on Ethan's refrigerator for months, the one showing 3 figures standing in front of a house, with storm clouds over the adults' heads. She'd saved it when they moved, tucked it away carefully. Look at this, she said, showing it to Ethan. Remember when she drew this? When we were both too scared to be honest with each other? How could I forget? That drawing changed everything. I want to ask her to draw a new one, an updated version now that we're actually living together. You think she will? I think she'd love to. The next day, Adrienne asked Maya if she'd create a new family portrait. Maya agreed enthusiastically, disappearing into her room with her expensive colored pencils and a determined expression. She emerged 3 hours later with a drawing that made both adults cry. It showed the same three figures, but this time they were standing in front of their actual house, the Craftsman with its distinctive porch and the large oak tree in the front yard. Maya had drawn herself in the middle again, but this time she wasn't just holding hands with the adults. She'd added details that told a story. Ethan holding a book, Adrienne with a camera around her neck, Maya with her sketchbook. And above their heads, instead of storm clouds, she'd drawn a bright sun with rays extending across the entire page. At the bottom, in careful lettering, she'd written, "Our Family," by Maya Carter. "It's perfect," Adrienne whispered. "Can we frame it?" Maya asked, "and put it in the living room where everyone can see it?" "Absolutely," Ethan said. They hung the drawing in the living room that evening, in a place of honor above the fireplace. And every time Ethan looked at it in the weeks and months that followed, he was reminded of how far they'd all come. From grief and loneliness and fear to hope and love and the courage to build something new. On a cool October evening, almost exactly a year after their first dinner together, Ethan and Adrienne stood in the backyard while Maya practiced her photography skills, capturing the autumn leaves in the golden hour light. "I have something for you," Ethan said. Adrienne turned to him, curious. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and this time it was a ring. "I know we said we weren't there yet," Ethan began, his voice shaking slightly. "But I think we are now. I think we've been there for a while, actually. We've built a life together. We've weathered conflicts and come out stronger. We've learned how to be honest with each other, even when it's hard. And I don't want to wait anymore to make this official." He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with 3 small diamonds. "Adrienne Cole, will you marry me? Will you officially become part of this family that we've already built? Will you take on all the chaos and joy and complicated beauty of loving a widower and his daughter for the rest of your life?" Adrienne's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that tasted like joy and tears, and the future they'd fought so hard to create. "Did you ask her?" Maya's voice came from behind them. They turned to find her standing there with her camera, grinning enormously. "You knew?" Ethan asked. "Of course I knew. You asked my permission last week, remember? You said you wanted to make sure I was okay with Adrienne officially becoming my stepmom." She held up her camera. "I got pictures of the whole thing for our family album." Adrienne laughed through her tears and held out her hand to Maya. "Come here, sweetheart." Maya ran to them, and they wrapped her in a hug, the 3 of them standing together under the oak tree as the sun set and the autumn leaves fell around them like blessings. The wedding took place the following spring in their backyard under that same oak tree. It was small and intimate, just close family and friends. Maya served as the maid of honor, wearing a purple dress she'd picked out herself and carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. Mrs. Henderson cried through the entire ceremony. Adrienne's sister gave a toast about never believing her workaholic sibling would find someone who understood her. And when Ethan and Adrienne exchanged vows they'd written themselves, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. "I promise to be honest with you, even when it's hard," Adrienne said. "I promise to make decisions with you, not for you. I promise to love your daughter as if she were my own. And I promise to keep choosing this, choosing us, every single day for the rest of my life. I promise to be brave enough to let you in," Ethan said. "I promise to trust that loving you doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means making room for the future. I promise to build a life with you that honors where we've been and embraces where we're going. And I promise to keep growing my heart bigger because you taught me that love doesn't divide. It multiplies." When they kissed, Maya cheered loudly, and everyone laughed. The reception was casual and joyful, a potluck dinner, dancing on the lawn, Maya and her new cousins running through the yard chasing fireflies as the evening deepened. At one point, Ethan found himself standing alone for a moment, watching Adrienne dance with Maya, both of them laughing at something. Mrs. Henderson appeared beside him, following his gaze. "You did good, dear," she said softly. "I got lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it. You were brave enough to try again. That's not luck. That's courage." He smiled at her. "Thank you for everything, for watching Maya all those times, for the advice, for believing this was possible when I didn't." "That's what neighbors are for." She patted his arm. "Now go dance with your wife. That's what husbands do." He found Adrienne and Maya and pulled them both into a dance, the three of them moving together under the string lights and stars. And as he held them close, Ethan realized that the future he'd once thought was over had simply been waiting for him to be brave enough to reach for it. Years later, Maya would look back on this time as the moment when their family truly began. Not when her mother died, though that had been the catalyst. Not when Ethan and Adrienne first met, though that had been the spark. But in all the small choices that followed, the honest conversations, the fights and reconciliations, the decision to keep choosing each other even when it was hard. She would remember her father learning to write again, finding his voice after years of silence. She would remember Adrienne teaching her photography, showing her how to see beauty in ordinary moments. She would remember the drawing she'd made of storm clouds that had sparked a crucial conversation. And she would remember the updated version with sunshine instead of rain that hung in their living room as a testament to transformation. But most of all, she would remember the lesson they'd all learned together, that loving again after loss required tremendous courage. It meant risking your heart when every instinct said to protect it. It meant choosing vulnerability over safety, honesty over comfort, hope over fear. And it meant understanding that the heart's capacity for love was infinite. That you didn't love someone new by forgetting someone old, you simply made room for both, the past and the present, the memory and the moment, the grief and the joy. That night, after all the guests had left and Maya was asleep upstairs, Ethan and Adrienne stood in their backyard, looking at their house lit from within. It glowed warm against the dark sky, every window a testament to the life they'd built inside. "Thank you," Ethan said. "For what?" "For asking me to dinner that night, for being brave first, for teaching me that it was okay to live again." Adrienne took his hand. "Thank you for saying yes, for trusting me with your heart, for showing me what family really means." They stood together in the darkness, and Ethan thought about all the moments that had led them here. The dating profile that Adrienne had deleted, the honest conversations that had cracked them both open, the fight that had almost broken them, the courage it had taken to try again. And he thought about Sarah, who he would always love, who had given him Maya and years of happiness and memories he'd treasure forever. He'd spent so long believing that honoring her meant staying frozen in grief. But he understood now that the best way to honor her was to live, fully, bravely, with his whole heart. Because love didn't end with loss. It transformed. It grew. It made room for new chapters while honoring the old ones. And if you were brave enough to risk your heart again, it could lead you to places more beautiful than you'd ever imagined. In the house behind them, Maya's drawing hung in the living room, visible through the window. 3 figures standing in sunshine in front of the home they'd built together. A family not defined by biology or tradition, but by choice, by courage, by the daily decision to show up for each other, to be honest, to keep choosing love even when, especially when, it was terrifying. And as Ethan held Adrienne close under the stars, he felt his heart full to bursting, not despite the grief he'd carried, but alongside it, big enough to hold memory and joy, loss and hope, yesterday and tomorrow, big enough to hold everything that mattered, big enough to hold home.